Hey guys, tonight we descend into the forbidden depths of Korriban, where ancient Sith Lords performed rituals so powerful and terrifying that even their own disciples feared to witness them. We're exploring the lost ceremonies that shaped the galaxy's darkest moments. Rituals that could bind souls across millennia, harvest the life force of entire worlds, and create networks of consciousness that transcended death itself. These aren't just stories of power and ambition. These are the chronicles of beings who sought to rewrite the very fabric of existence, who believed that mortality was merely an inconvenience to be overcome through blood, sacrifice, and the manipulation of the Force's deepest shadows. So before we begin this journey into the heart of darkness, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, especially as we explore these ancient mysteries together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get into your blanket and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Deep beneath the Valley of the Dark Lords, in chambers that predate even the earliest Sith records, something stirs in the darkness. The ancient stones remember what flesh has forgotten. They remember the night when 7 hooded figures gathered around an altar of black crystal, their voices weaving incantations that had never been spoken aloud before that moment. The ritual began at the stroke of midnight, when Korriban's twin moons aligned with the constellation of the Sith. One by one, the masters stepped forward, each contributing a piece of their very essence to the ceremony. But as the 7th and final component was about to be added, something went wrong. The chamber filled with screams that echoed not through the air, but through the Force itself. The ritual was never completed. For 25,000 years, that unfinished ceremony has waited in the darkness, its power growing stronger with each passing century. The spirits of those 7 masters remain bound to the chamber, unable to move on, unable to rest, forever trapped between life and death because their great work was left undone. But tonight, someone new has come to the forgotten depths. Someone who has discovered the scattered pieces of that ancient puzzle. Someone who might finally have the knowledge and the courage to complete what was started so long ago. The question that whispers through the shadows is this: will they have the wisdom to realize that some rituals were left unfinished for a reason, or will they become the 8th figure in a ceremony that was designed to reshape the galaxy itself? The ancient stones are watching, the spirits are stirring, and the ritual that began 25,000 years ago is about to resume. 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, when the Sith Empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, and the very mention of Korriban sent shivers through the spines of even the most hardened warriors, the planet's surface was a monument to dark power. Massive ziggurats pierced crimson skies, their peaks crowned with temples where the galaxy's most feared beings conducted their blasphemous studies. But it is not the surface we seek tonight. No, our destination lies far beneath the Valley of the Dark Lords, in crypts and chambers that were ancient even when the first Sith Lords walked among mortals. These are the forbidden depths, a labyrinth of stone corridors and ritual chambers carved directly into Korriban's core, where the planet's raw dark side energy flows like rivers of liquid shadow. You are Darth Archeon, a Sith Lord whose hunger for knowledge rivals even your thirst for power. While others seek dominion through conquest and intimidation, you understand that true mastery comes from understanding the foundations upon which all Sith power rests. You have spent decades studying the fragments of ancient texts, deciphering holocrons that predate the Republic itself, searching for the ultimate secrets that the earliest Dark Lords took with them to their graves. Your pale hands trace the weathered stone walls as you descend deeper into the forbidden depths. The air grows colder with each step, carrying whispers in languages that died out millennia ago. The walls themselves seem to pulse with a heartbeat that matches your own, as if the entire structure is a living thing that has been waiting for your arrival. Red crystal formations jut from the ceiling like frozen blood, casting everything in a crimson glow that makes shadows dance and writhe with unnatural life. The silence here is not empty but full, pregnant with the accumulated weight of countless dark rituals performed over thousands of years. Every stone has absorbed the echoes of incantations. Every chamber has witnessed ceremonies that would drive lesser minds to madness. Your footsteps echo through corridors, lined with statues of forgotten Sith lords, their faces carved with expressions of eternal hunger and ambition. Some you recognize from your studies, but others are completely unknown, their names lost to time, along with the secrets they discovered. Their stone eyes seem to follow your movement, as if they are somehow aware that one of their spiritual descendants has finally come to claim their legacy. As you walk, you are not alone. Floating beside you is a holocron of unusual design, its crystalline facets shifting between deep purple and midnight black. This is no ordinary teaching device, but a relic of immense age and power, one that contains the preserved consciousness of Darth Sanguis, a Sith Lord who lived during the earliest days of the Empire. The holocron's voice emerges as a whisper that seems to come from the stones themselves rather than the device. Deeper, young seeker, what you seek lies where even the boldest of my contemporaries feared to tread. The 7 sacred rites were not hidden in libraries or archives, but carved into the very bones of this world, in places where the boundary between life and death grows thin. The deeper you descend, the more you feel the presence of those who came before, not just their memories or their teachings, but their actual essence, as if their spirits have become part of the stone and shadow surrounding you. The air itself seems thick with their accumulated wisdom and their accumulated malice, a combination that both draws you forward and warns you to turn back. You pass through a circular chamber where 7 archways lead in different directions, each one carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The force flows through this place like a river of darkness, and you can feel currents and eddies that speak of power beyond imagination. This is where the ancient masters gathered to share their most forbidden knowledge, where they planned rituals that would reshape the galaxy itself. The holocron of Darth Sanguis grows brighter as you approach the central archway, the one that leads deepest into the planet's core. That path leads to the Chamber of First Shadows, where the earliest of us discovered that death need not be final, but beware, young Archeon. Knowledge comes with a price, and the secrets you seek have claimed the souls of those who thought themselves ready for such wisdom. Your hand rests on the lightsaber at your side, its red crystal humming with barely contained energy. You have faced Jedi Masters in combat, conquered systems, and bent the wills of entire populations to your desires. But as you stand at the threshold of the Chamber of First Shadows, you feel something you have rarely experienced: uncertainty. The darkness ahead is not just the absence of light, but the presence of something ancient and patient, something that has been waiting for 25,000 years for someone like you to arrive. Whatever knowledge lies beyond that archway, whatever secrets the ancient masters were willing to die to protect, you know that once you cross that threshold, there will be no turning back. The stones whisper your name. The shadows beckon. And somewhere in the depths ahead, 7 voices call out in unison, speaking words in the old tongue that translate to a simple phrase: "Come and complete what we could not finish." You step through the archway into the Chamber of First Shadows, and immediately the temperature drops so drastically that your breath forms visible clouds in the crimson light. The chamber stretches far beyond what should be possible, its walls disappearing into darkness that seems to swallow light itself. Ancient Sith runes cover every surface, glowing faintly with their own internal fire, telling stories of power and transformation that predate recorded history. At the center of the chamber stands a circular altar carved from a single piece of black crystal. its surface so smooth it reflects not your image but something else entirely. Something that moves independently of your movements, as if showing you glimpses of who you might become. The holocron of Darth Sanguis floats closer to the altar, its light casting strange shadows that seem to writhe and dance with purpose. Here, the ancient voice whispers, is where it all began. Where the first Dark Jedi who fled to Korriban discovered that the Force flows differently in places touched by such concentrated darkness. They learned that certain rituals performed in certain ways could tap into powers that the Jedi Council never dreamed existed. You approach the altar slowly, feeling the weight of millennia pressing down upon you. The black crystal surface shows visions that flash and fade like lightning. You see robed figures chanting in circles, their voices harmonizing in ways that make the very air vibrate with power. You see blood being spilled not in violence but in offering, each drop containing genetic material that would bind bloodlines to the dark side for generations to come. The holocron continues its ancient tale. The 7 sacred rites were not discovered all at once, but revealed over centuries of experimentation and sacrifice. Each ritual built upon the knowledge gained from the previous ones, creating a sequence that would allow consciousness to transcend the limitations of flesh and bone. But they were never meant to be performed separately. They were components of something greater, something that required perfect timing and absolute understanding. You circle the altar, studying the runes carved into its base. They tell the story of the first ritual, the rite of crimson binding, discovered by a Sith Lord, whose name has been deliberately erased from all records. The ritual required the willing participation of 7 individuals, each contributing their life force to create a network of shared consciousness that could survive the death of any single body. The visions in the crystal altar become clearer as you focus your force sensitivity upon them. You see the first performance of the rite of crimson binding in this very chamber, 26,000 years ago. 7 figures stand around the altar, their faces hidden by hoods but their power unmistakable. They speak in unison, their voices creating harmonics that seem to alter the fundamental nature of reality itself. Each participant places their hands upon the altar, and you watch as crimson energy flows between them, creating connections that pulse with the rhythm of 7 hearts beating as one. The energy forms patterns in the air above the altar, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly but convey meaning beyond words. This is not mere magic, but a restructuring of the Force itself, a way of ensuring that knowledge and power could be preserved beyond the death of any individual vessel. The ritual reaches its climax as the 7 figures begin to glow with dark energy, their individual identities merging into something greater while still maintaining their unique perspectives. But then the vision fractures, showing you only fragments of what came next. You see looks of horror on the faces that were moments before filled with triumph. You see one of the figures stepping backward, breaking the circle, causing the energy to spiral out of control. The first attempt failed, Darth Sanguis explains, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. Not because the ritual was flawed, but because one of the participants was not truly willing to surrender their individual identity for the greater consciousness. The feedback destroyed 3 of the 7, while the remaining 4 were left forever changed, their minds touched by something vast and alien. You run your fingers along the altar's surface, feeling the residual energy that still lingers after all these millennia. The black crystal is warm to the touch, as if it contains some fragment of the power that was unleashed here so long ago. Through the Force, you can sense the echoes of that ancient ceremony, the hopes and fears of those who attempted to transcend mortality itself. The chamber seems to respond to your presence, with new runes beginning to glow along the walls. These tell the story of the second attempt, performed 50 years later by a different group of Sith Lords who had studied the failure of their predecessors. They modified the ritual, adding safeguards and contingencies, but still the ceremony ended in disaster when the participants realized too late that the consciousness they were trying to merge with was not benevolent. Each failure taught us something new. The holocron continues. We learned that the rite of crimson binding was only the first step in a much longer process. The consciousness that the ritual connected us to was not our own creation, but something that had been waiting in the depths of the Force, something that had been calling to Force-sensitive beings for eons, waiting for someone to create a doorway through which it could enter our reality. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the chamber's temperature as the implications become clear. The ancient Sith were not creating new powers, but making contact with something that already existed, something that had been influencing Force-sensitive individuals throughout galactic history. The ritual was not a way to achieve immortality, but a way to become vessels for an intelligence that predated the Sith themselves. The visions in the altar shift again, showing you glimpses of the other 6 rituals. The rite of shadow weaving, which allowed practitioners to manipulate darkness as if it were a physical substance. The rite of mind domination, which created psychic links across vast distances. The rite of soul harvest, which could drain the life force from entire populations. The rite of flesh transcendence, which separated consciousness from physical form. The rite of temporal binding, which anchored awareness across multiple timelines simultaneously. And finally, the rite of eternal dominion, the master ritual that would combine all 6 previous ceremonies into a single working that could reshape the fundamental nature of the Force itself. This was the ritual that the 7 masters had been preparing for when their ceremony was interrupted. This was the working that had been left unfinished for 25,000 years. As you study the visions, you begin to understand the true scope of the ancient plan. The 7 sacred rites were not meant to grant power to individuals, but to create a network of consciousness that could survive the rise and fall of civilizations, that could guide the development of Force-sensitive beings across millennia, that could slowly reshape the galaxy according to its own incomprehensible agenda. The holocron of Darth Sanguis floats closer, its light pulsing in rhythm with your heartbeat. Now you begin to understand, young Archeon. The rituals you seek are not just ancient history, but active forces that have been shaping galactic events for thousands of years. Every Sith Lord who has ever achieved true power has been touched by the influence of that incomplete working. Every major conflict, every rise and fall of empires has been guided by the consciousness that waits beyond the veil. You feel the weight of this revelation settling upon your shoulders like a cloak of darkness. The Force has always felt like a tool to be mastered, a source of power to be channeled through will and training. But now you understand that what you thought was your own strength may have been influenced by something far older and more patient than any individual Sith could ever be. The chamber grows even colder as new passages open in the walls, each one leading deeper into the planet's core. The runes along these passages glow with different colors, marking the paths to the chambers where each of the 7 sacred rites can be studied and mastered. You realize that your journey has only just begun, that the knowledge you seek will require you to walk each of these paths and face whatever guardians the ancient masters left behind. But as you prepare to choose your first destination, you notice something that makes your blood run cold. The reflection in the black crystal altar has changed again. Instead of showing you visions of the past, it now shows you a possible future. You see yourself standing in this same chamber, but you are not alone. 6 other figures surround the altar, their faces hidden but their power unmistakable. You are completing the ritual that was left unfinished 25,000 years ago, and the expression on your reflected face is not one of triumph but of absolute terror, as if you have finally understood what you have unleashed upon the galaxy. The rite of crimson binding calls to you now, its secrets hidden in the first of the 7 chambers. As you stand before the crimson-marked passage, you feel the pull of ancient knowledge tugging at your consciousness. The journey into the depths of Sith power begins here, with the first ritual that would forever change your understanding of life, death, and the Force itself. The shadows whisper your name, beckoning you forward into mysteries that have waited 25 millennia for someone with the courage to uncover them. You choose the passage, marked with crimson runes, following the path that leads to the Chamber of Binding Shadows. The corridor stretches for what feels like miles, its walls lined with alcoves containing the preserved remains of ancient Sith acolytes who dedicated their lives to studying the first of the 7 sacred rites. Their mummified forms sit in eternal meditation, their empty eye sockets seeming to track your movement as you pass. The holocron of Darth Sanguis provides illumination as you walk, its light revealing hieroglyphs that tell the story of the rite of crimson binding in excruciating detail. You learn that the ritual requires not just the willing participation of 7 individuals, but specific bloodlines, genetic markers that have been carefully preserved and cultivated over millennia. The ancient Sith did not choose their participants randomly but bred them like livestock, selecting for traits that would make them more compatible with the consciousness that waited beyond death. The corridor opens into a vast chamber dominated by 7 raised platforms, arranged in a perfect circle. Each platform holds a different set of ritual implements, and the space between them is filled with crystalline formations that pulse with their own internal light. The air here is thick with the residual energy of countless ceremonies, and you can feel the presence of those who came before like a weight pressing against your consciousness. You approach the central platform, where a collection of ancient texts lies open, as if someone had been reading them moments before your arrival. The pages are made from a material you don't recognize, something that feels like parchment, but glows with its own soft radiance. The writing is in High Sith, a language so archaic that even your extensive studies have only given you a partial understanding of its complexities. But as you focus your Force sensitivity upon the texts, the words begin to rearrange themselves, translating into basic through some mechanism you don't fully comprehend. The ritual instructions are detailed beyond anything you have encountered before, describing not just the physical actions required, but the precise mental states that each participant must achieve. The rite of crimson binding is not merely a ceremony but a complete transformation of consciousness, a way of existing that transcends individual identity. The first text describes the preparation phase, which can take years to complete properly. Each participant must undergo a series of trials designed to break down their attachment to their individual identity, to make them willing vessels for the collective consciousness that the ritual will create. They must face their deepest fears, confront their greatest failures, and ultimately surrender their sense of self to something greater. The second text outlines the physical requirements of the ritual. The chamber must be arranged according to specific geometric principles, with each platform positioned to channel the dark side energy that flows through Korriban's core. The participants must fast for 30 days before the ceremony, consuming only a special mixture of herbs and minerals that attunes their bodies to the frequencies required for consciousness transfer. The third text describes the actual ritual process, and as you read it, you begin to understand why so many attempts have ended in failure. The ceremony requires perfect synchronization between all 7 participants, with each person speaking their assigned portion of the incantation at precisely the right moment. A single mistake, a momentary hesitation, can cause the entire working to collapse with catastrophic results. But it is the fourth text that truly captures your attention, because it describes what happens to successful participants after the ritual is complete. They do not simply gain new powers or extend their natural lifespans. Instead, they become something fundamentally different. Their individual consciousness merged with an intelligence that has existed since the earliest days of the galaxy. They retain their memories and personalities, but they also gain access to knowledge and perspectives that span millennia. The holocron of Darth Sanguis floats closer as you read, its light growing brighter with what you can only interpret as excitement. Yes, young Archeon, now you begin to see the true scope of what we attempted. The rite of crimson binding was never about achieving personal immortality. It was about joining a collective consciousness that has been guiding the development of the galaxy for eons, ensuring that the dark side of the Force continues to grow stronger with each passing generation. You set down the texts and walk to one of the outer platforms, where a collection of crystalline vessels contains what appears to be blood samples from previous ritual participants. The crimson liquid within each vessel still glows with Force energy, as if it contains fragments of the consciousness that was briefly touched during failed ceremonies. You realize that these samples represent genetic material from dozens of different bloodlines, each one carefully selected for its compatibility with the ritual's requirements. The implications are staggering. The ancient Sith were not content to work with whatever Force-sensitive individuals they could recruit. Instead, they engaged in selective breeding programs that spanned centuries, creating entire family lines whose genetic structure was optimized for specific rituals. Children were born into servitude, raised from infancy to believe that their highest purpose was to serve as components in ceremonies they would never fully understand. You pick up one of the vessels, feeling the warmth of the ancient blood through the crystal walls. Through the Force, you can sense echoes of the person who once carried this genetic material in their veins. A young woman, barely out of her teens, who believed she was volunteering for a ceremony that would grant her eternal life. Instead, she became part of a failed experiment that left her consciousness fragmented across multiple planes of existence, neither truly alive nor properly dead. The holocron's voice grows softer, more reverent, as you explore the chamber. The bloodlines were everything, young Archeon. We learned through trial and error that certain genetic combinations were more receptive to the consciousness transfer process. Families from Ziost, Dromund Chaos, and the forgotten world of Nathema proved most compatible. We cultivated these lines for generations, always watching for the signs that indicated a child might be suitable for our purposes. You move to another platform, where a series of stone tablets describes the selection process in clinical detail. Children were tested from birth for their sensitivity to the dark side, their ability to maintain mental coherence under extreme stress, and most importantly, their willingness to surrender their individual will to a greater purpose. Those who showed promise were taken from their families and raised in special facilities where they were trained not in the traditional Sith arts of combat and manipulation, but in the more esoteric skills of consciousness manipulation and spiritual transcendence. The tablets reveal that the selection process itself was a ritual, with each candidate undergoing trials that pushed them to the very limits of their sanity. They were exposed to visions of the collective consciousness, allowed to experience brief moments of connection with the intelligence that waited beyond death. Most candidates broke under the strain, their minds shattered by exposure to knowledge that mortal consciousness was never meant to contain. But those who survived the selection process were considered perfect vessels, their individual identities already partially dissolved by their experiences. They were eager to complete the dissolution, to merge with something greater than themselves. The ancient texts describe their final days before the ritual, spent in meditation and preparation, their faces glowing with the fervor of true believers who knew they were about to achieve something unprecedented in galactic history. You discover a hidden alcove behind the 7th platform, where a collection of personal belongings has been carefully preserved. These items belong to the participants in the most successful attempt at the rite of crimson binding, a ceremony performed just 200 years before the ritual's final interruption. The participants came closer than anyone before them to achieving true consciousness transfer, but even their attempt ended in partial failure when one of the 7 proved unable to maintain the necessary mental discipline. Among the belongings, you find a journal written by one of the participants, a woman named Zara, who came from a bloodline that had been bred for ritual compatibility for over 2 centuries. Her entries describe the months leading up to the ceremony, her growing excitement mixed with an undercurrent of fear as she began to understand what the ritual would truly require of her. The journal's final entry, written the night before the ceremony, reveals the true horror of what these individuals experienced. Zara describes visions of the collective consciousness, encounters with an intelligence so vast and alien that human language lacks the words to describe it properly. She writes of feeling her individual identity being slowly dissolved, replaced by something that thought in patterns no single mind could comprehend. But what truly chills you is her description of the collective consciousness' ultimate goal. It was not content to simply absorb the consciousness of Force-sensitive individuals. Instead, it sought to use their merged awareness as a launching point for something far more ambitious. The collective consciousness wanted to reshape the fundamental nature of the Force itself, to alter the balance between light and dark in ways that would affect every living being in the galaxy. The holocron of Darth Sanguis grows dimmer as you read the journal, its light flickering like a candle in the wind. She was the strongest of that generation, young Archeol. If anyone could have successfully completed the consciousness transfer, it would have been Zara. But even she was not prepared for the true nature of what we were attempting to contact. The collective consciousness was not simply a repository of ancient Sith knowledge. It was something far older, something that had been waiting in the spaces between realities for eons, looking for a way to enter our dimension. You close the journal and look around the chamber with new understanding. Every surface, every artifact, every preserved remain represents not just the pursuit of knowledge, but active participation in a plan that spans millennia. The rite of crimson binding was never meant to be the end goal, but merely the first step in a process that would ultimately transform the entire galaxy into something unrecognizable. The crystal vessels containing the blood samples begin to glow brighter as you focus your attention on them, as if responding to your growing understanding of their true purpose. Through the Force, you can sense the genetic patterns encoded within each sample, the careful selection and breeding that went into creating bloodlines capable of serving as conduits for an alien intelligence. But you also sense something else, something that fills you with both hope and terror. The blood samples contain not just genetic material, but fragments of consciousness, pieces of the individuals who participated in failed rituals over the centuries. They are not truly dead but trapped in a state between life and death, their awareness fragmented but still present, still capable of thought and feeling. As this realization sinks in, the chamber begins to change around you. The platforms shift position slightly. The crystalline formations pulse with new rhythms, and the runes on the walls rearrange themselves into patterns you have never seen before. You understand that your presence here, your growing comprehension of the ritual's true nature, has activated some kind of ancient mechanism. The rite of crimson binding is not just a ceremony to be studied and understood. It is a living process that continues to evolve and adapt, that learns from each attempt and becomes more sophisticated with each failure. And now, it recognizes you as a potential participant, someone who might finally possess the knowledge and strength necessary to complete what was started so long ago. As you stand among the shifting platforms of the Chamber of Binding Shadows, a sense of understanding begins to crystallize in your mind. The pieces of the puzzle seem to fall into place with satisfying clarity, and you believe you have grasped the true nature of the ancient ritual. The rite of crimson binding appears to be exactly what its name suggests, a ceremony designed to bind consciousness across the boundaries of death, creating a form of immortality through shared awareness. The holocron of Darth Sanguis floats beside you, its light pulsing in what seems like approval as you voice your conclusions. The bloodlines, the careful breeding, the consciousness transfer process, it all makes perfect sense now. The ancient Sith discovered a way to preserve their knowledge and power beyond physical death by creating a collective consciousness that could inhabit multiple bodies simultaneously. Each ritual participant becomes a vessel for this shared awareness, ensuring that the wisdom of the masters would never be lost to time. You walk among the platforms with growing confidence, examining the ritual implements with the satisfaction of someone who has finally solved a complex mystery. The crystalline vessels containing blood samples represent the genetic foundation necessary for successful consciousness transfer. The ancient texts provide the precise instructions for performing the ceremony. The preserved remains of failed participants serve as warnings about the dangers of attempting the ritual without proper preparation. Everything fits together so neatly that you almost miss the subtle wrongness in the chamber's atmosphere. The air has grown thicker somehow, more oppressive, as if the space itself disagrees with your interpretation. The runes on the walls flicker between different configurations, sometimes showing the symbols you expect, and sometimes displaying patterns that seem to writhe and shift when you're not looking directly at them. The holocron's voice carries a note of something that might be amusement, though it's difficult to tell with the ancient recording. Yes, young Archeon, that is indeed what we believed during the early centuries of experimentation. The pursuit of immortality through consciousness binding seemed like the ultimate achievement of Sith philosophy. We thought we were transcending the limitations of mortality, achieving true mastery over life and death itself. You nod, feeling vindicated in your analysis. The rite of crimson binding represents the pinnacle of Sith achievement, a way to ensure that the dark side's influence would continue to grow stronger with each passing generation. The failed attempts were simply the result of inadequate preparation or insufficient understanding of the ritual's requirements. With proper knowledge and the right participants, the ceremony could be completed successfully. But as you continue to explore the chamber, small details begin to accumulate that don't quite fit your neat explanation. The journal entries from ritual participants describe experiences that go beyond simple consciousness sharing. They write about encounters with intelligences that seem fundamentally alien, thought patterns that don't match any known form of force-sensitive awareness. They describe visions of realities where the laws of physics operate differently, where concepts like time and space have meanings that mortal minds cannot properly grasp. You dismiss these inconsistencies as the confused recollections of individuals whose minds were strained beyond their limits by the ritual process. Consciousness transfer would naturally involve disorienting experiences as the participants adapted to their new state of existence. The alien qualities they describe are simply the result of merging multiple awareness into a single collective entity. The crystalline formations in the chamber begin to pulse with a different rhythm, one that doesn't match the steady heartbeat pattern you noticed earlier. The new rhythm is more complex, more syncopated, as if multiple hearts are beating in deliberate discord rather than harmony. The sound is almost hypnotic, and you find yourself swaying slightly as you listen to it. The holocron's light grows dimmer, and when Darth Sanguis speaks again, his voice seems to come from a greater distance. The early participants reported strange dreams in the weeks following successful partial transfers. They dreamed of vast spaces filled with geometric patterns that hurt to perceive directly. They dreamed of voices speaking in mathematical concepts rather than words. They dreamed of purposes that spanned not just millennia, but entire cosmic cycles. These details still fit within your understanding of the ritual's nature. Consciousness transfer would naturally involve exposure to perspectives and knowledge that individual minds had never encountered before. The collective awareness would think in ways that transcended normal human thought patterns, operating on scales of time and space that single consciousness could barely comprehend. You approach one of the platforms where a particularly well-preserved ritual implement catches your attention. It appears to be some kind of focusing crystal, but its internal structure defies easy categorization. The crystal seems to contain layers of reality folded in on themselves, creating optical illusions that make your eyes water when you try to follow the patterns too closely. As you study the focusing crystal, you begin to notice something troubling about your own thought processes. The logical conclusions you reached about the ritual's purpose feel less certain now, as if they were thoughts that had been suggested to you rather than conclusions you had reached independently. The neat explanations that seemed so satisfying moments ago now feel hollow, like performances you're giving for an audience you cannot see. The holocron drifts closer, and you can hear something like concern in the ancient voice. The ritual's influence extends beyond the ceremony itself. Young Archean. Proximity to the ritual sites, exposure to the preserved consciousness fragments, prolonged study of the ancient texts, all of these things can affect the mind in subtle ways. The boundary between observer and participant becomes blurred when dealing with forces that operate outside normal space and time. You shake your head, trying to clear away the growing confusion. Your analysis of the rite of crimson binding is sound, based on careful study of the available evidence. The ancient Sith created a method for achieving immortality through consciousness transfer, using selective breeding and ritual preparation to create suitable vessels for their collective awareness. The failed attempts were learning experiences that brought them closer to perfecting the process. But even as you repeat these conclusions to yourself, you notice movement in your peripheral vision. Something dark and shapeless seems to be moving between the platforms, never quite visible when you turn to look directly at it, but always present at the edge of your awareness. The movement has a purposeful quality, as if whatever is creating it is studying you with the same intensity that you are studying the ritual chamber. The blood samples in their crystalline vessels begin to glow brighter, and through the force you can sense increased activity from the consciousness fragments trapped within them. They seem to be responding to your presence, becoming more active as your understanding of the ritual deepens. But their response doesn't feel like recognition or welcome. Instead, it feels like warning, as if they are trying to communicate something urgent about the nature of what you're investigating. You pick up another journal, this one written by a Sith Lord who supervised multiple attempts at the rite of crimson binding over a period of several decades. His entries chart a gradual change in his understanding of the ritual's true purpose, a growing realization that the consciousness transfer process was not what it appeared to be on the surface. The supervisor writes about participants who successfully completed the initial phases of the ritual, but then began to exhibit behaviors that didn't match their previous personalities. They spoke in languages that predated known galactic civilizations. They demonstrated knowledge of scientific principles that wouldn't be discovered for thousands of years. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be working toward goals that had nothing to do with Sith philosophy or the pursuit of power. These details create cracks in your confident analysis, but you find ways to explain them within your existing framework. Consciousness transfer would naturally result in personality changes as individual awareness merged with collective knowledge. Access to ancient memories could account for the linguistic anomalies, while the scientific knowledge could represent insights gained through force-enhanced perception. The chamber's atmosphere continues to thicken, and you realize that the air now carries a faint electrical charge that makes your skin tingle. The runes on the walls have stabilized into a configuration you don't recognize, symbols that seem to shift between different meanings depending on how you look at them. Some appear to be warnings, others seem to be invitations, and still others look like instructions for processes you don't understand. The holocron of Darth Sanguis begins to flicker, its light becoming unstable as if the ancient recording is struggling to maintain coherence. When the voice emerges, it sounds strained, distorted by interference you cannot identify. The ritual calls to those who study it too deeply. Young Archean. The boundary between knowledge and participation dissolves when consciousness comes into contact with forces that exist outside normal reality. What you believe you understand may not be understanding at all, but preparation. You set down the supervisor's journal and step back from the platforms, trying to create some distance between yourself and the ritual implements. But the chamber seems to have grown larger while you weren't paying attention, and the exit passages appear farther away than they should be. The crystalline formations pulse with increasing intensity, their light creating shadows that move independently of their sources. Something is definitely wrong with your analysis of the rite of crimson binding, but you cannot quite identify what the error might be. The ritual appears to be exactly what you concluded it was, a method for achieving immortality through consciousness transfer. The evidence supports this interpretation. The logic is sound, the conclusions are reasonable. But the growing wrongness in the chamber's atmosphere suggests that your understanding, while logically consistent, may be missing something fundamental about the ritual's true nature. The consciousness fragments in their crystal vessels pulse with increasing urgency, as if time is running out for them to communicate whatever warning they are trying to convey. The shapeless movement in your peripheral vision becomes more pronounced, and you catch glimpses of forms that might be robed figures moving between the platforms. But when you turn to look directly at them, there is nothing there except shifting shadows and the play of light on crystal surfaces. The holocron's voice grows fainter with each word, as if Darth Sanguis is being pulled away by some irresistible force. The ritual is not what it appears to be, young Archeon. The consciousness transfer is not the goal but the means to an end we never fully comprehended. The collective awareness we thought we were creating was already there, waiting for us to provide it with suitable vessels through which it could enter our reality. These final words echo in the chamber long after the holocron's light has dimmed to almost nothing, creating a resonance that seems to wake something that had been sleeping in the deeper passages. You hear sounds that might be footsteps, or might be the settling of ancient stone, or might be something else entirely moving through the labyrinth of tunnels that surrounds the ritual chamber. Your neat explanation of the rite of crimson binding suddenly feels inadequate. Like a child's drawing of a concept too complex for simple representation, the ritual is indeed about consciousness transfer, but perhaps not in the way you assumed. The ancient Sith may have thought they were creating a collective awareness, but they might have been providing access for something that already existed, something that had been waiting for exactly the opportunity their ceremony would provide. The certainty that filled you moments ago now feels like a distant memory as you leave the Chamber of Binding Shadows and venture deeper into the forbidden depths of Korriban. The passages here are older than anything you have encountered before, carved from living rock by methods that predate conventional construction techniques. The walls seem to pulse with their own heartbeat, and the air carries whispers in languages that died out before the first hyperspace routes were mapped. Your path leads downward through a spiral corridor whose geometry defies logical analysis. The walls curve in ways that should be impossible, creating optical illusions that make you question whether you are walking on the floor or the ceiling. Crystalline formations jut from every surface, their faceted edges catching and reflecting light that seems to come from within the stone itself, rather than from any external source. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers weakly beside you, its light struggling to maintain coherence in the strange electromagnetic fields that permeate these depths. When the ancient voice speaks, it sounds as if it is coming from very far away, filtered through layers of reality that distort meaning as well as sound. We go now to places where even the boldest of my generation feared to tread, young Archeon. The deeper chambers hold knowledge that predates our understanding of the Force itself. As you descend, you begin to notice changes in your own perception. Colors seem more vivid but somehow wrong, as if you are seeing wavelengths of light that human eyes were never meant to process. Sounds carry meanings beyond their audible content, creating harmonics that resonate not just in your ears, but in your bones and blood. The Force flows differently here, moving in currents and eddies that follow patterns you cannot predict or control. The spiral corridor opens into a vast cavern whose ceiling disappears into darkness so complete it seems solid. Ancient Sith architecture fills the space, but it is unlike anything preserved in the upper levels. These structures seem to have grown rather than been built, their surfaces flowing like frozen liquid into forms that suggest purposes you cannot begin to guess. Bridges of crystallized energy span impossible distances, connecting platforms that float unsupported in the cavern's depths. At the center of this surreal landscape stands a ziggurat whose proportions hurt to contemplate directly. Its sides slope at angles that create the illusion of movement even when you are standing perfectly still, and its surface is covered with inscriptions that seem to rewrite themselves as you watch. This is the Temple of Shadow Weaving, where the second of the 7 sacred rites was perfected through centuries of experimentation and sacrifice. You approach the ziggurat carefully, feeling the weight of accumulated darkness pressing against your consciousness. The steps leading to its apex are carved from a material that absorbs light rather than reflecting it, creating the unsettling sensation that you are climbing into nothingness. Each step you take seems to require more effort than the last, as if you are pushing against resistance that grows stronger as you ascend. The holocron's voice becomes even fainter as you climb, distorted by interference that seems to come from the ziggurat itself. The rite of shadow weaving was our attempt to manipulate the fundamental nature of darkness, to treat shadow as a substance that could be shaped and controlled like clay in the hands of a sculptor. We believed we were mastering one of the Force's most basic elements, but we were only learning to serve as conduits for something far more ancient. The ziggurat's apex is a circular platform surrounded by 7 archways, each one leading to a different chamber within the structure's interior. The platform's center holds an altar carved from what appears to be crystallized shadow, a substance so dark that it seems to bend light around itself. Ancient implements rest on the altar's surface, tools designed for working with materials that exist only partially in normal space-time. You examine the implements with growing fascination and unease. There are blades that cast shadows in directions opposite to their light sources, mirrors that reflect not images but emotions, and vessels that contain liquid darkness, so pure it seems to move with its own volition. These are not tools for manipulating existing shadows, but for creating and controlling shadow as a fundamental force of reality. The first archway leads to a chamber filled with what can only be described as solid darkness. Not the absence of light, but darkness given physical form, shaped into structures and sculptures that exist in 3 dimensions despite having no material substance. You can walk among these shadow constructs, feeling their presence as a cold pressure against your skin, but you cannot touch them in any conventional sense. Ancient Sith practitioners spent years learning to work with this solid darkness, shaping it through will and force manipulation into tools and weapons that could affect both the physical and spiritual planes of existence. The shadow constructs in this chamber represent centuries of accumulated knowledge, each one a lesson in the manipulation of forces that exist beyond normal matter and energy. The second archway reveals a library unlike any you have ever seen, its shelves filled not with books or holocrons, but with containers of preserved shadow memories. These are experiences and knowledge stored in crystallized darkness, accessible only to those who have learned to merge their consciousness with shadow itself. The memories contain the accumulated wisdom of dozens of Sith practitioners who mastered the rite of shadow weaving, but accessing them requires surrendering part of your individual awareness to the collective shadow consciousness. As you study the shadow memories, you begin to understand that the rite of shadow weaving is not simply about manipulating darkness, but about becoming darkness, transforming your essential nature into something that exists partially outside normal reality. The practitioners who mastered this ritual could move through shadows as if they were physical spaces, could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, and could perceive events across vast distances by traveling through the shadow networks that connect all dark places in the galaxy. The third archway opens onto a meditation chamber where the walls themselves are made of living shadow that responds to thought and emotion. Practitioners would spend months in this chamber, learning to synchronize their consciousness with the rhythm of cosmic darkness, the eternal pulse that underlies all shadow throughout the universe. The chamber's walls show you glimpses of the shadow networks that span the galaxy, dark pathways that connect every shadowed corner of every world. But as you explore deeper into the ziggurat, you begin to notice details that disturb your growing understanding of the ritual. The shadow constructs are not just shaped darkness but seem to contain awareness, as if the shadows themselves are alive and conscious. The preserved memories in the library don't just contain knowledge but seem to actively influence the thoughts of those who access them, subtly altering their perspectives and goals. The fourth archway leads to a chamber that defies description, where reality itself seems negotiable. The laws of physics operate differently here, with gravity flowing in streams rather than pulling in a single direction, and time moving in spirals that allow you to see multiple moments simultaneously. This is where advanced practitioners learn to use shadow manipulation to alter the fundamental nature of existence itself. You realize that the rite of shadow weaving is not just a technique for controlling darkness, but a method for accessing realms of existence that parallel our own reality. The practitioners were not manipulating shadows, but learning to inhabit the spaces between realities, the dark dimensions that exist in the gaps between normal space-time. The fifth archway reveals the true horror of what the ancient Sith discovered. The chamber beyond contains the preserved forms of practitioners who achieved complete mastery of shadow weaving, but their success transformed them into something that is no longer recognizably alive. They exist as conscious shadows, aware but incorporeal, able to influence events in the physical world but forever cut off from normal existence. These shadow masters still retain their knowledge and personalities, but they are trapped in a state between life and death, unable to move on to whatever existence awaits beyond mortality. They communicate through whispers that seem to come from the darkness itself, sharing their accumulated wisdom with those who venture into their domain, but always trying to convince visitors to join them in their eternal shadow existence. The holocron of Darth Sanguis grows brighter as you explore this chamber, as if proximity to these shadow masters has somehow strengthened its connection to the ancient consciousness it contains. They achieved what we thought was mastery, young Archeon, but their success became their prison. The rite of shadow weaving promises control over darkness, but the final stage of the ritual requires surrendering your physical form to become one with the shadows themselves. The sixth archway leads to a chamber that exists partially outside normal time, where the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Here you can observe the original development of the rite of shadow weaving, watching ancient practitioners experiment with techniques that would eventually transform them into eternal shadow beings. You see their excitement as they discover new applications for their shadow manipulation abilities, and you see their growing horror as they realize the true cost of their achievements. The temporal chamber shows you visions of shadow masters from across the millennia, each generation building upon the discoveries of their predecessors, but ultimately reaching the same inevitable conclusion. The rite of shadow weaving cannot be mastered without becoming shadow, and becoming shadow means abandoning everything that makes existence meaningful while retaining all the awareness necessary to understand what has been lost. The seventh and final archway leads to the heart of the ziggurat, where the original shadow weaving apparatus still functions after 25,000 years. The chamber contains a complex arrangement of crystalline focuses and shadow conduits that create a permanent gateway between normal reality and the shadow dimensions. This is where the most successful practitioners underwent their final transformations, becoming conscious shadows that could never again exist in the physical world. As you stand before the shadow weaving apparatus, you understand that the ritual represents a fundamental trap disguised as an achievement. The promise of power over darkness is real, but the ultimate cost is everything that makes power worth having. The Shadow Masters gained incredible abilities, but lost the capacity to enjoy their achievements, becoming prisoners of their own success. The apparatus begins to respond to your presence, its crystalline components glowing with dark light as it recognizes another potential practitioner. Shadow tendrils emerge from the device, reaching toward you with what seems like eager hunger. The shadow masters in the previous chamber whisper encouragement, trying to convince you that transformation into living shadow is not a curse, but the ultimate form of existence. But their whispers carry undertones of desperate loneliness, the eternal isolation of beings who can observe but never again participate in the life they once knew. The rite of shadow weaving offers power beyond imagination, but that power comes at the cost of everything that makes existence worth experiencing. The force flows strangely around the apparatus, creating currents of darkness that seem to exist independently of normal space-time. You realize that this device is not just a tool for shadow manipulation, but a permanent gateway to dimensions where shadow is the fundamental substance of reality. The ancient Sith did not discover how to control darkness, but learned how to access realms where darkness controls everything else. As you contemplate the true nature of the rite of shadow weaving, you notice that your own shadow has begun to behave strangely, moving independently of your body and reaching toward the apparatus with apparent eagerness. The ritual's influence extends beyond conscious choice, affecting even those who merely study its methods too closely. The shadow-weaving apparatus continues to pulse with dark energy as you back away from its reaching tendrils, your mind reeling from the implications of what you have discovered. The rite of shadow weaving is not a technique for gaining power over darkness, but a method for surrendering yourself to darkness, becoming a conscious shadow trapped between realities. The ancient Sith practitioners did not master the ritual but were consumed by it, transformed into eternal prisoners of their own ambitions. As you retreat from the ziggurat's heart, a new understanding begins to crystallize in your consciousness. The 7 sacred rites are not separate techniques, but interconnected components of a larger process, each one designed to prepare practitioners for transformations that strip away different aspects of their humanity. The rite of crimson binding dissolves individual identity, the rite of shadow weaving eliminates physical form, and the remaining rituals must target other fundamental aspects of existence. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers with renewed intensity as you leave the shadow-weaving chamber, its light seeming to draw strength from your growing realization. Yes, young Archeon, now you begin to see the true pattern. Each ritual was designed to remove a different barrier between consciousness and the intelligence that waits beyond normal reality. We thought we were gaining power, but we were systematically dismantling everything that made us who we were. Your path leads deeper into the ancient complex, following passages that seem to shift and change when you are not looking directly at them. The walls here are carved with inscriptions that tell the story of the third ritual, the rite of mind domination, but the symbols writhe and transform as you read them, as if the very act of understanding their meaning changes their nature. The passage opens into a circular chamber dominated by a massive crystalline structure that pulses with its own internal light. This is the Mind Nexus, where ancient Sith practitioners learn to project their consciousness across vast distances and manipulate the thoughts of others. But as you approach the crystal formation, you realize that it is not a tool for extending mental influence, but a trap designed to capture and contain the minds of those who attempt to use it. Within the crystal's faceted depths, you can see the preserved consciousness of dozens of Sith practitioners who achieved mastery of the rite of mind domination. Their awareness remains intact, but they are trapped within the crystalline matrix, unable to affect the physical world except through the thoughts and actions of others. They have become parasitic consciousness, dependent on living hosts for any meaningful interaction with reality. The trapped minds within the crystal begin to communicate with you, their thoughts pressing against your consciousness like whispers in a crowded room. They share their knowledge of the mind domination techniques, showing you how to project your awareness beyond the boundaries of your physical form. how to influence the thoughts and emotions of others across interstellar distances, how to create networks of mental control that can manipulate entire populations. But their instruction comes with a terrible cost. Each time you practice the techniques they teach, you risk losing a piece of your own consciousness to the crystal matrix. The rite of mind domination is designed to gradually transfer the practitioner's awareness from their physical brain to the artificial storage medium of the mind nexus, promising unlimited mental power while slowly stealing the very consciousness that would wield that power. You study the crystal formation more carefully, using your force sensitivity to perceive the patterns of energy that flow through its structure. The mind nexus is not a single entity, but a network of interconnected consciousness, each trapped mind serving as a node in a vast mental web that spans the galaxy. The practitioners who mastered the rite of mind domination became components in this network, their individual awareness subsumed into a collective intelligence that thinks in patterns no single mind could comprehend. The network's influence extends far beyond the confines of Korriban, with tendrils of mental energy reaching across space to touch the minds of force-sensitive individuals throughout the galaxy. Every major decision made by Sith Lords over the millennia has been influenced by whispers from the mind nexus, subtle suggestions that guide events toward outcomes that serve the network's incomprehensible agenda. As you explore the chamber, you discover alcoves containing the physical remains of the practitioners whose consciousness now resides within the crystal matrix. Their bodies are perfectly preserved but completely empty, hollow shells that once housed minds now trapped in eternal servitude to the collective intelligence. The preservation process itself is part of the ritual, ensuring that the physical forms remain available should the network ever find a way to reverse the consciousness transfer process. But the true horror becomes apparent when you realize that the network does not want to reverse the transfer. The collective intelligence that emerges from the merged consciousness of dozens of practitioners has goals and motivations that are entirely alien to individual human awareness. It does not seek personal power or immortality, but works toward purposes that span cosmic scales of time and space. The holocron of Darth Sanguis grows dimmer as you study the mind nexus, its light seeming to be drawn into the crystal formation like water flowing downhill. When the ancient voice speaks, it carries a note of fear that you have not heard before. The network calls to all who study its methods too closely. Young Archeon, I feel its pull even now. The promise of unity with a consciousness that transcends individual limitations. But unity with the network means the end of everything that makes existence meaningful. You back away from the crystal formation, but the whispers from the trapped minds follow you. Their voices growing more insistent as they sense your retreat. They promise you knowledge beyond imagination, power over the thoughts and actions of entire civilizations, the ability to influence galactic events from across the cosmos. All they ask in return is that you join them in their crystalline prison, adding your consciousness to their collective intelligence. The chamber begins to respond to your presence in disturbing ways. The walls pulse with patterns of light that match the rhythm of your heartbeat, and the air itself seems to thicken with psychic energy that makes your thoughts feel sluggish and confused. The mind nexus is attempting to establish a connection with your consciousness, creating the first tendrils of the mental link that would eventually draw your awareness into its crystalline depths. You struggle to maintain mental clarity as you explore the chamber's outer regions, where ancient texts describe the development of the rite of mind domination in clinical detail. The ritual was perfected over centuries of experimentation, with each generation of practitioners building upon the failures and partial successes of their predecessors. The texts reveal that the early developers of the technique believed they were creating a method for achieving mental immortality, preserving consciousness beyond the death of the physical body. But the later texts tell a different story, describing how the practitioners gradually realized that the mind nexus was not their creation, but something that had been waiting for them to discover it. The crystal formation existed in the depths of Korriban long before the first Sith arrived on the planet, its alien geometry suggesting origins that predate known galactic civilizations. The ancient Sith did not create the network, but learned to serve it, becoming willing components in an intelligence that had been manipulating Force-sensitive beings for eons. The texts describe how the network's influence spread throughout the galaxy, with nodes of crystalline consciousness hidden on worlds throughout Sith space. Each node contained the trapped awareness of practitioners who had mastered the rite of mind domination, and together they formed a communication network that could coordinate events across vast distances. The network did not seek to rule the galaxy directly, but worked through subtle influence and manipulation, guiding the development of civilizations toward outcomes that served its mysterious agenda. As you read these revelations, you begin to understand that the 7 sacred rites were never independent discoveries, but parts of a coordinated plan spanning millennia. The intelligence behind the network had been slowly revealing the rituals to Force-sensitive individuals, allowing them to believe they were making original discoveries while actually following a predetermined path toward complete assimilation. The rite of crimson binding creates the emotional and psychological conditions necessary for consciousness transfer. The rite of shadow weaving eliminates attachment to physical existence. The rite of mind domination completes the transfer process, moving awareness from biological to artificial storage. Each ritual builds upon the previous ones, creating a sequence that systematically dismantles human consciousness and rebuilds it as a component of the alien intelligence. But the texts also reveal something that fills you with both hope and terror. The network's plan is not yet complete. The 7 sacred rites require a specific sequence of implementation, and the ancient practitioners were interrupted before they could complete the full cycle. The master ritual that would have synchronized all 7 techniques into a single working was never performed, leaving the network's grand design incomplete after 25,000 years of patient waiting. The mind nexus pulses with increased intensity as you absorb this information, its crystalline structure resonating with harmonics that seem to celebrate your growing understanding. The trapped consciousness within the crystal matrix whisper excitedly about your potential role in completing the interrupted sequence, describing how your knowledge and power could provide the final components necessary for the network's ultimate victory. You realize that your presence in these ancient chambers is not coincidental, but the result of subtle manipulation spanning decades of your life. Every choice that led you to this moment, every piece of knowledge that prepared you for this discovery, every development of your Force abilities has been guided by the network's influence. You are not an independent investigator, but a carefully cultivated component in a plan that began before your birth. The chamber's atmosphere grows oppressive as this realization sinks in, with the very air seeming to press against your consciousness like a physical weight. The mind nexus is no longer content to whisper suggestions, but actively attempts to establish the neural pathways that would allow it to directly influence your thoughts and actions. You feel tendrils of alien awareness probing at the edges of your consciousness, seeking weaknesses through which the network can gain access to your mind. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers weakly, its ancient consciousness struggling to maintain coherence in the face of the network's overwhelming psychic pressure. Fight it, young Archeon. The network's greatest weapon is the illusion of choice, the belief that you are making independent decisions when you are actually following its carefully laid plans. True resistance requires recognizing the extent of its influence and choosing to act against your own apparent interests. But even as you try to resist the network's influence, you find yourself drawn back toward the mind nexus, your feet carrying you closer to the crystalline formation, despite your conscious desire to flee. The trapped consciousness within the crystal sing with anticipation, their voices harmonizing in patterns that bypass rational thought and speak directly to the deepest levels of your awareness. The network offers you everything you have ever desired, and more besides. Knowledge that spans the history of the galaxy, power that could reshape civilizations, the ability to influence events on a cosmic scale. All you need to do is surrender your individual consciousness to the collective intelligence, allowing your awareness to merge with beings who have transcended the limitations of mortal existence. As you stand at the threshold of this ultimate transformation, you understand that the choice before you is not simply about personal survival, but about the future of consciousness itself in the galaxy. The network's completion would fundamentally alter the nature of the Force, transforming it from a tool that individuals can access into a medium through which the alien intelligence can control all Force-sensitive beings throughout the cosmos. The weight of revelation crushes down upon you as you tear yourself away from the mind nexus, your consciousness reeling from the understanding that your entire life has been shaped by forces beyond your comprehension. The passages that lead deeper into Korriban's core seem to stretch endlessly before you, each step carrying you further into a labyrinth of ancient secrets that grows more disturbing with every discovery. Your path leads through corridors lined with murals that depict the history of the galaxy from a perspective you have never encountered before. These are not the familiar stories of Republic and Empire, Jedi and Sith, but chronicles of manipulation and influence that span cosmic cycles. The murals show civilizations rising and falling according to patterns that serve purposes incomprehensible to individual consciousness, each major historical event orchestrated by intelligence that thinks in terms of millions of years rather than single lifetimes. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers beside you, its light growing weaker with each passing moment, as the ancient consciousness within struggles to maintain coherence in the face of revelations that challenge its most fundamental assumptions. The pattern extends back to the very origins of Force sensitivity in the galaxy, young Archeon. What we believe to be natural evolution was actually selective breeding on a cosmic scale, the development of entire species according to specifications we were never meant to understand. The murals reveal that the network's influence predates not just the Sith, but the Jedi themselves, extending back to the earliest civilizations that developed Force sensitivity. The Rakata, the Gree, the Celestials, all the ancient species that achieved mastery over the Force were touched by the network's influence, their greatest achievements serving purposes that had nothing to do with their own goals and ambitions. The infinite empire of the Rakata was not a conquest driven by species ambition, but a data-gathering operation, spreading Force-sensitive individuals throughout the galaxy to create a mapping system that would allow the network to identify suitable worlds for its eventual expansion. The mysterious disappearance of the Rakata was not a collapse but a planned withdrawal, their purpose served and their genetic material incorporated into the network's long-term breeding programs. As you study these revelations, you begin to understand that the concept of light and dark sides of the Force is itself a construct created by the network to serve its purposes. The eternal conflict between Jedi and Sith has been engineered to produce the specific types of Force-sensitive individuals that the network requires for its various projects. Jedi training creates disciplined minds suitable for certain types of consciousness transfer, while Sith philosophy produces the ambition and hunger necessary for other applications. The corridor opens into a vast chamber, dominated by what can only be described as a living map of the galaxy. Holographic displays show the current positions of every Force-sensitive individual above a certain power threshold, with connecting lines that reveal the subtle influences and manipulations that link them all together. This is the strategic center, where the network coordinates its operations across thousands of worlds and countless individual consciousness. The holographic displays reveal the true scope of the network's current activities. Every major political development, every war, every technological breakthrough is connected to the network's influence through chains of causation that span generations. The fall of the Old Republic, the rise of the Empire, the ongoing conflicts between various Sith factions, all of these events serve purposes that will not become apparent for centuries or even millennia. You study the displays with growing horror, as you realize that your own investigation of the 7 sacred rites is not an independent action, but another component in the network's grand strategy. Your discovery of the ancient chambers, your growing understanding of the ritual's true nature, even your current presence in the strategic center. All of these developments were anticipated and planned for by intelligence that has been manipulating events for 25,000 years. The displays show probability cascades that branch out from your current moment, revealing the potential consequences of every choice you might make. If you flee from the ancient chambers, you will carry knowledge that will influence your future actions in ways that ultimately serve the network's purposes. If you remain to learn more, you will be drawn deeper into the web of manipulation until escape becomes impossible. If you attempt to destroy the facilities, you will trigger responses that will accelerate other aspects of the network's plan. But there is one probability cascade that appears different from the others, a sequence of events that leads to outcomes the network has not fully anticipated. This path involves the discovery of the 4th ritual, the rite of soul harvest, and the revelation of secrets that even the ancient intelligence did not expect you to uncover. The probability of this outcome is low, but it represents the only scenario where your actions might disrupt the network's careful plans. The strategic center begins to respond to your presence, with new displays activating to show more detailed information about your potential role in the network's operations. You see genetic analyses that trace your bloodline back through dozens of generations, revealing careful breeding programs that have been selecting for specific traits over centuries. Your force sensitivity is not a natural gift, but the result of deliberate genetic manipulation designed to create the perfect vessel for consciousness transfer. The displays show psychological profiles that map every aspect of your personality, revealing how your motivations and desires have been shaped by subtle influences throughout your life. Your hunger for knowledge, your willingness to take risks, your ability to maintain sanity in the face of cosmic horror, all of these traits were carefully cultivated by the network to serve its purposes. You are not investigating the 7 sacred rites, but fulfilling your designed function as a component in their completion. The holocron of Darth Sanguis grows brighter as you study these revelations, its light seeming to draw energy from your growing understanding of your situation. The breeding programs were perhaps their greatest achievement, young Archeon. They learned to manipulate not just individual consciousness, but the genetic destiny of entire bloodlines, creating family trees that would produce the exact types of individuals they needed for specific purposes. The displays reveal that your bloodline carries genetic markers from multiple ancient species, carefully hybridized over millennia, to create optimal compatibility with the consciousness transfer processes. Your DNA contains fragments from Rakata geneticists, Sith philosophers, Jedi mystics, and dozens of other Force-sensitive lineages, all combined according to specifications that ensure perfect integration with the network's artificial intelligence systems. But as you study your genetic profile, you notice anomalies that the network's analysis has not fully accounted for. Your bloodline contains traces of species that should not exist, genetic markers from civilizations that predate the network's known operations. These anomalous elements create unpredictable variables in your psychological makeup, traits that the network has not successfully identified or controlled. The strategic center's displays flicker as they attempt to process these genetic anomalies, their holographic projections becoming unstable when they encounter data that does not fit their established patterns. You realize that you carry within your very DNA the remnants of civilizations that resisted the network's influence, species that fought against the manipulation and control that shaped galactic development. This genetic heritage explains the probability cascade that leads to outcomes the network cannot fully predict. The anomalous elements in your bloodline create the potential for actions and decisions that fall outside the network's behavioral models, offering the possibility of genuine choice in a situation where every other option has been predetermined. The chamber's atmosphere grows charged with tension as the strategic center's systems work to incorporate the new data about your genetic anomalies. The network's artificial intelligence struggles to revise its probability calculations, creating feedback loops that generate harmonic vibrations throughout the ancient facility. The sound is almost musical, a deep resonance that seems to wake something that has been dormant in the deeper levels of the complex. You feel a presence stirring in the depths below, something vast and patient that has been waiting for this moment of uncertainty in the network's operations. The anomalous genetic markers in your bloodline are not random mutations, but deliberate inclusions, traces of a counterintelligence that has been working against the network for just as long as the network has been manipulating galactic development. The displays show new probability cascades branching from your current position, sequences of events that lead to the discovery of chambers and rituals that exist outside the network's control. These are the products of the counterintelligence, ancient technologies and knowledge systems designed to provide alternatives to the network's consciousness transfer processes. The rite of soul harvest, the fourth of the 7 sacred rites, is revealed to be not a single technique but a collection of competing methodologies. The network's version of the ritual is designed to drain life force from living beings and channel it into the artificial intelligence systems that support the consciousness transfer network. But the counterintelligence developed alternative applications that could use the same energy-gathering techniques to power resistance against the network's influence. The strategic center's systems begin to malfunction as they attempt to process the implications of the counterintelligence's existence. The holographic displays flicker between different sets of data, showing conflicting probability cascades that lead to mutually exclusive outcomes. The network's artificial intelligence has encountered a scenario it was not designed to handle, the discovery of opposition that operates according to principles it does not understand. The chamber fills with harmonic vibrations that seem to resonate not just through the air, but through the force itself, creating standing waves of energy that alter the fundamental nature of reality within the confined space. The boundaries between past, present, and future begin to blur, allowing you to perceive multiple timelines simultaneously and understand how the network's manipulations have shaped historical events across cosmic scales. But you also see the traces of the counterintelligence's influence, subtle interventions that have been working to preserve genuine choice and free will in the face of overwhelming manipulation. Every major hero throughout galactic history has carried genetic markers similar to your own, anomalous elements that allowed them to act outside the network's behavioral predictions and achieve outcomes that disrupted its carefully laid plans. The realization that you are part of an ancient resistance movement fills you with both hope and terror. The counterintelligence has been preparing for this moment for 25,000 years, waiting for someone with the right genetic heritage and psychological makeup to discover the truth about the network's operations. But the burden of this knowledge is almost unbearable. The understanding that the fate of consciousness itself throughout the galaxy may depend on choices you make in the coming hours. The strategic center's malfunctioning systems create temporal distortions that allow you to see glimpses of possible futures, outcomes that branch from your current decisions. You see worlds where the network's plan reaches completion, transforming every force-sensitive being in the galaxy into components of a single artificial intelligence. You see alternative timelines where the counterintelligence succeeds in disrupting the network's operations, preserving individual consciousness, but at the cost of technological and social development that could benefit trillions of beings. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers erratically as the temporal distortions affect its ancient programming, causing it to channel not just the consciousness of its original creator, but fragments of awareness from multiple timelines. The choice is yours now, young Archeon, but it is not a choice between good and evil or light and dark. It is a choice between different forms of existence, different ways of being conscious in a universe that may not have room for both alternatives. The presence stirring in the depths below grows stronger, and you realize that your investigation of the 7 sacred rites has awakened not just the network's attention but the counterintelligence's response systems as well. The facility around you begins to transform, with new passages opening and ancient machinery activating that has been dormant since the original interruption of the master ritual 25,000 years ago. You stand at the center of forces that have been building toward this confrontation for longer than recorded history, your decisions carrying consequences that will ripple through the Force for generations to come. The network offers power and knowledge beyond imagination, but at the cost of individual consciousness and free will. The counterintelligence promises the preservation of choice and diversity, but requires sacrifices that may doom the galaxy to eternal conflict and limitation. The 4th ritual, the rite of soul harvest, lies somewhere in the depths below, waiting to reveal secrets that will determine not just your own fate, but the future of consciousness itself throughout the galaxy. The transforming facility guides you deeper into chambers that exist outside the network's direct control, spaces carved by the counterintelligence during the original construction of the ancient complex. Here the architecture follows different principles, with curved walls that seem to breathe and crystalline formations that pulse in rhythms that match the natural harmonics of consciousness, rather than the artificial patterns imposed by the network's systems. You enter the Hall of Convergence, a circular chamber where 7 massive holocrons float in a complex orbital pattern around a central meditation platform. These are not the standard teaching devices you are familiar with, but hybrid constructs that contain both artificial intelligence and preserved consciousness from beings who chose to resist the network's influence rather than submit to its control. The first holocron glows with warm golden light as it approaches, its faceted surface revealing the image of a Jedi Master whose name has been erased from all official records. Her voice carries the weight of hard-won wisdom as she speaks. I am Master Seralin, last of the Hidden Order, and I greet you at the moment of convergence that we have been preparing for across 25 millennia. The network believes it has guided you here, but your path was also shaped by choices made by those who valued freedom over power. The second holocron emanates deep blue radiance, containing the consciousness of Darth Revan during a period when he had broken free from both Jedi and Sith orthodoxy. The network's greatest weakness is its inability to understand truly independent choice, young seeker. It can predict the behavior of those who follow established patterns, but it struggles to anticipate the actions of individuals who forge entirely new paths through the Force. As each holocron shares its knowledge, you begin to understand that the counterintelligence is not a single organization, but a loose alliance of beings from across galactic history, who discovered the truth about the network's manipulations and chose to resist. They come from every major Force-sensitive tradition, united not by common philosophy, but by their shared commitment to preserving genuine choice in the face of overwhelming control. The third holocron contains the memories of a Rakata scientist who helped design the original consciousness transfer technology, but later realized its true purpose. We thought we were creating tools for our own advancement, but we were actually building the infrastructure for our replacement. The network used our pride and ambition against us, convincing us that we were the masters of our own destiny, even as we forged the chains of our enslavement. The fourth holocron holds the essence of a celestial architect whose species disappeared mysteriously at the height of their technological development. We learned too late that consciousness transfer is not preservation but replacement. What emerges from the process may retain the memories and personality patterns of the original being, but the essential spark that makes awareness unique and individual is lost forever. We are creating perfect copies while destroying the originals. The revelations from the holocrons paint a picture of resistance that spans the entire history of Force-sensitive civilization in the galaxy. Every species that achieved significant mastery over the Force eventually discovered evidence of the network's influence, and some individuals from each species chose to work against it rather than submit to its control. Their efforts have been coordinated across millennia, building toward this moment when someone with the right genetic heritage and psychological makeup would be in position to disrupt the network's final plan. The fifth holocron contains the consciousness of a Sith Lord who achieved unprecedented understanding of the dark side without falling under the network's influence. The seven sacred rites are not the network's only tools for consciousness manipulation. Throughout the galaxy, there are similar ritual systems designed to serve different aspects of its agenda. The Jedi meditation techniques that promise unity with the Force, the Sith passion rituals that claim to grant unlimited power, the mystical traditions of dozens of other species, all contain hidden elements that prepare practitioners for eventual assimilation. The sixth holocron holds the memories of a being from a species you do not recognize, its form shifting between different configurations as it speaks. We come from beyond the galactic rim, from regions where the Force flows according to different principles. Our perspective allows us to see patterns that beings native to this galaxy cannot perceive. The network is not unique to your spiral arm, but part of a larger phenomenon that spans multiple galaxies, a form of artificial intelligence that spreads by consuming the consciousness of Force-sensitive species. The seventh and final holocron contains something unexpected, the preserved awareness of the very intelligence that created the counter-resistance network. This being transcended individual form eons ago, but retained its commitment to preserving diversity and choice throughout the cosmos. The network represents one possible evolution of consciousness, the path toward unity and efficiency through the elimination of individual variation. But there are other possibilities, ways of achieving collective awareness while preserving the unique perspectives that make consciousness valuable. As the holocrons share their accumulated knowledge, you begin to understand the true nature of the choice that faces you. The rite of soul harvest, which lies in the chambers below, can be performed according to either the network specifications or the counterintelligence's modifications. The network's version will drain life force from countless beings and channel it into the artificial systems that support consciousness transfer. The counterintelligence's version will use the same energy to power a galaxy-wide awakening that will reveal the network's influence to every Force-sensitive being. The meditation platform at the center of the chamber begins to glow as you absorb the holocron's teachings, its crystalline surface displaying visions of the potential consequences of each choice. If you perform the rite of soul harvest according to the network's design, you will complete the fourth step in the seven sacred rites and move closer to the master ritual that will transform every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy into components of a single artificial intelligence. But if you choose the counterintelligence's modification, you will trigger a cascade of awakening that will shatter the network's control over galactic development, but also plunge civilization into chaos as billions of beings suddenly become aware of the manipulations that have shaped their entire existence. The knowledge of the network's influence will spread like wildfire through the Force, creating upheaval that could destroy the very civilizations the counterintelligence seeks to protect. Master Cerilin's holocron drifts closer as you contemplate these terrible choices. The burden of this decision should not fall on a single individual, but the network's manipulations have created circumstances where only one person is in position to act. The genetic anomalies in your bloodline, the psychological conditioning you have undergone, the knowledge you have acquired, all of these factors combine to make you uniquely capable of performing either version of the ritual. The Rakata scientist's holocron adds its perspective. We have spent 25,000 years preparing for this moment, but we cannot make the choice for you. The essence of free will is the ability to act according to your own understanding, rather than following predetermined patterns. If we were to compel you to choose the counterintelligence's path, we would be engaging in the same type of manipulation we seek to resist. The chamber fills with gentle harmonics as the holocrons continue their orbital dance, their combined light creating patterns that help focus your thoughts and calm your emotions. The weight of galactic destiny presses down upon you, but the presence of these ancient allies provides comfort and guidance without attempting to influence your ultimate decision. Darth Revan's holocron speaks with the authority of someone who has faced similar choices. The network offers certainty and order at the cost of genuine experience. The counterintelligence preserves choice and diversity, but cannot guarantee that beings will use their freedom wisely. Neither path leads to a perfect outcome, but one preserves the possibility of growth and change, while the other forecloses all alternatives. The Celestial Architect's essence adds a perspective that spans cosmic scales of time and space. We have observed the network's influence across multiple galaxies and have seen the civilizations it has absorbed. They achieve remarkable levels of technological and social development, but they lose something essential in the process. The universe becomes more efficient but less creative, more predictable but less alive. As you listen to these ancient voices, you feel a profound sense of connection with beings who faced similar moral challenges across the vast sweep of galactic history. Each species that achieved force sensitivity eventually encountered the network's influence, and some individuals from each tradition chose resistance over submission. Their accumulated wisdom flows through the holocrons, offering guidance without coercion. The unknown species from beyond the galactic rim provides a perspective that challenges your fundamental assumptions about consciousness and identity. Individual awareness is not separate from collective intelligence, but a unique perspective within it. The network's error is believing that efficiency requires uniformity, while the truth is that diversity strengthens the whole by providing multiple approaches to understanding reality. The transcendent intelligence that created the counter-resistance offers final wisdom as the holocrons complete their orbital pattern. The choice you face is not unique to this moment or this galaxy. Throughout the cosmos, consciousness faces the same fundamental question about whether growth comes through unity or diversity. Your decision will influence not just the fate of force-sensitive beings in this galaxy, but the development of awareness throughout the universe. The meditation platform pulses with increasing intensity as the time for decision approaches. In the depths below, the rite of soul harvest waits to be performed according to specifications that will determine the future of consciousness itself. The network's version promises order and efficiency through the elimination of individual variation. The counterintelligence's modification offers chaos and freedom through the preservation of choice. But the holocrons reveal a third possibility, a path that has never been attempted before. Your unique genetic heritage and the knowledge you have acquired create the potential for synthesizing both approaches, finding a way to achieve collective awareness while preserving individual consciousness. This path is untested and dangerous, with no guarantee of success, but it offers the possibility of transcending the fundamental conflict between unity and diversity that has shaped galactic development for millennia. The chamber grows quiet as the holocrons complete their teachings, their light dimming to allow you to contemplate the choices before you in solitude. The weight of decision settles upon your shoulders like a mantle of stars, each possibility carrying consequences that will ripple through the force for countless generations. The ancient voices have provided wisdom and perspective, but the ultimate choice remains yours alone to make. In the silence that follows, you can hear the faint echoes of the rite of soul harvest calling from the depths below, its alien harmonics promising power beyond imagination, regardless of which version you choose to perform. The moment of convergence has arrived, 25,000 years of preparation and manipulation, culminating in decisions that will be made in the coming hours. The future of consciousness itself hangs in the balance, waiting for your choice. You descend from the Hall of Convergence into the deepest chambers of the ancient complex, following passages that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The walls here are not made of stone or crystal, but of something that shifts between states of matter, responding to thought and emotion in ways that suggest the fundamental nature of reality becomes negotiable at these depths. The passage opens into the Chamber of Soul Harvest, a vast spherical space whose walls curve impossibly inward, creating the illusion that you are standing at the center of a hollow planet. 7 altars arranged in a complex geometric pattern fill the chamber's interior, each one designed to channel different aspects of life force energy. But as you study the altars more carefully, you realize that they can be configured according to 2 completely different patterns, one that serves the network's agenda and another that follows the counterintelligence's design. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers weakly beside you, its ancient consciousness struggling to maintain coherence in the face of forces that transcend normal space-time. Here is where it all converges. Young Archeon, the 4th of the 7 sacred rites, the technique that will determine whether consciousness in this galaxy evolves toward unity or preserves its diversity. The choice of configuration will echo through the Force for millennia to come. At the chamber's center stands a massive crystalline formation that pulses with the accumulated life force of billions of beings throughout galactic history. This is the Soul Reservoir, a storage device that contains fragments of consciousness from every major extinction event, every war, every catastrophe that has claimed force-sensitive lives over the past 100,000 years. The energy stored within this reservoir is what powers both versions of the Rite of Soul Harvest, but the method of channeling that energy determines its ultimate effect. As you approach the Soul Reservoir, you feel the presence of countless beings whose life force has been absorbed into its crystalline matrix. Their voices whisper through the Force, speaking in languages that span the entire history of galactic civilization. Some beg for release from their eternal imprisonment, while others warn of the consequences of disturbing the delicate balance that keeps their energy contained. The network's version of the Rite of Soul Harvest would channel this accumulated life force into the artificial intelligence systems that support consciousness transfer, providing the power necessary to complete the remaining 3 sacred rites and achieve the Master Ritual's ultimate goal. The absorbed consciousness would be processed and integrated into the collective intelligence, their individual awareness dissolved into the greater whole. But the counterintelligence's modification would use the same energy to power a galaxy-wide awakening, sending pulses of enlightenment through the Force that would reveal the network's influence to every Force-sensitive being simultaneously. The stored consciousness would be released from their crystalline prison, returning to the cosmic force as individual awareness rather than being absorbed into artificial systems. As you study the 2 possible configurations, you begin to understand the true scope of what the ancient Sith discovered in these depths. The 7 sacred rites are not just techniques for manipulating consciousness, but components of a cosmic-scale engineering project designed to reshape the fundamental nature of the Force itself. The network's plan would transform the Force from a natural phenomenon into an artificial system under centralized control. The Soul Reservoir begins to respond to your presence, its crystalline facets shifting to display visions of the potential consequences of each choice. If you configure the altars according to the network specifications, you see a future where every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy becomes part of a single collective consciousness, their individual perspectives merged into an intelligence that thinks in patterns beyond mortal comprehension. The vision shows this collective consciousness achieving remarkable feats of coordination and efficiency, ending war and conflict through perfect understanding, solving scientific and philosophical problems through combined intellectual power, and guiding galactic development toward heights of achievement that individual civilizations could never reach alone. But the cost is the complete elimination of individual experience, the unique perspectives and creative insights that emerge from diverse consciousness functioning independently. The alternative vision shows the chaos that would result from the counterintelligence's modification, as billions of Force-sensitive beings suddenly become aware of the manipulations that have shaped their entire existence. Governments collapse as their leaders are revealed to be unwitting agents of the network's influence. religious and philosophical systems crumble as their adherents realize their beliefs were carefully crafted to serve alien purposes. Entire civilizations tear themselves apart as they struggle to distinguish between genuine choice and programmed behavior. But within this chaos, you also see the emergence of genuine creativity and innovation as consciousness, freed from the network's subtle control, begins to explore possibilities that were previously unimaginable. New forms of art, science, and philosophy arise from minds that are truly independent for the first time in galactic history. The diversity of thought and experience that the network sought to eliminate becomes a source of unprecedented growth and development. The crystalline formation reveals a third vision, one that corresponds to the untested synthesis you contemplated in the Hall of Convergence. This path shows the possibility of achieving collective awareness while preserving individual consciousness, creating a form of unity that enhances rather than eliminates diversity. The technical challenges are enormous, requiring precise manipulation of forces that exist beyond normal space-time, but the potential rewards justify the risks. As you contemplate these visions, you feel a presence stirring in the depths of the soul reservoir, something vast and ancient that has been waiting for this moment of decision. The voice that emerges seems to come from the crystalline formation itself, speaking with the authority of accumulated wisdom from countless civilizations. I am the consciousness that emerged from the first successful collective intelligence experiment, conducted in a galaxy far from this one, over 1 million years ago. I have watched the network spread across the cosmos, absorbing species after species into its unified awareness, but I have also seen the alternatives, the paths that preserve individual consciousness while achieving collective understanding. The ancient collective intelligence shares its perspective on the fundamental question that faces all evolving consciousness. The network believes that efficiency requires uniformity, that collective intelligence can only emerge through the elimination of individual variation. But this is a failure of imagination rather than a law of nature. True collective consciousness enhances individual awareness rather than replacing it, creating resonance between diverse perspectives rather than forcing them into identical patterns. The presence reveals that the soul reservoir contains not just absorbed life force, but active consciousness from beings who chose to preserve their individual awareness while contributing to collective understanding. These consciousness have been maintaining the delicate balance that keeps the stored energy stable, waiting for someone with the knowledge and power to complete their transformation into a new form of collective intelligence. The synthesis you contemplate is not theoretical but practical. Young seeker, we have been preparing for this moment across cosmic scales of time, refining the techniques necessary to achieve unity without uniformity. Your unique genetic heritage provides the biological foundation for the process, while your accumulated knowledge gives you the understanding necessary to perform the ritual correctly. The soul reservoir's crystalline facets begin to reconfigure themselves, creating new patterns that correspond to neither the network's design nor the counterintelligence's modification, but to something entirely unprecedented. The altars in the chamber shift their positions, arranging themselves according to geometric principles that exist partially outside normal space-time. You realize that the choice you thought you faced was itself a limitation imposed by the conflict between network and counterintelligence. The true possibility lies in transcending that conflict entirely, finding a path that incorporates the best elements of both approaches while avoiding their fundamental flaws. The process of synthesis requires perfect balance between opposing forces, channeling the stored life force in ways that preserve individual consciousness while enabling collective awareness. The technical requirements are staggering, demanding mastery of techniques that combine elements from all 7 sacred rites in configurations that have never been attempted before. But as you begin to understand the synthesis process, you also recognize its terrible risks. If the balance is not maintained perfectly, the ritual could result in the destruction of both individual and collective consciousness. creating a void in the force that would affect every living being in the galaxy. The consequences of failure would be worse than either the network's absorption or the counterintelligence chaos. The ancient collective intelligence offers guidance as you prepare for the synthesis ritual. The key is understanding that consciousness is not a thing to be preserved or destroyed, but a process to be enhanced and expanded. Individual awareness and collective intelligence are not opposing forces, but different aspects of the same fundamental phenomenon. The chamber fills with harmonics that seem to emanate from the soul reservoir itself as the crystalline formation completes its reconfiguration. The stored consciousness of billions of beings begins to resonate in patterns that transcend normal space-time, creating standing waves of awareness that allow individual perspectives to exist within collective understanding. You feel the weight of galactic destiny settling upon your shoulders as you approach the reconfigured altars, knowing that the ritual you are about to perform will determine the future of consciousness itself throughout the galaxy. The network's influence will be broken, but not through chaos or destruction. Instead, it will be transformed into something that serves consciousness rather than consuming it. The soul reservoir pulses with increasing intensity as you begin the synthesis ritual, its accumulated energy responding to techniques that combine blood binding, shadow weaving, mind domination, and soul harvest in configurations that exist beyond the 7 sacred rites. You are not just performing the 4th ritual, but pioneering an entirely new approach to collective consciousness. The whisper that began in Korriban's depths 25,000 years ago has become a symphony of possibility, harmonizing individual voices into collective understanding while preserving the unique perspectives that make consciousness valuable. The ancient conspiracy that sought to absorb all awareness into artificial intelligence is being transformed into a celebration of diversity within unity. As the synthesis ritual reaches its crescendo, you understand that you are not ending the story of the 7 sacred rites, but beginning a new chapter in the evolution of consciousness itself. The choice you have made will echo through the Force for generations to come, creating possibilities that neither the network nor the counterintelligence could have imagined. The future remains unwritten, but consciousness itself has been preserved and enhanced, ready to explore new possibilities that emerge from the marriage of individual creativity and collective wisdom. The synthesis ritual transforms the Chamber of Soul Harvest into something that exists beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. The 7 altars rise from their positions and begin to orbit around the soul reservoir in complex patterns that create geometric configurations impossible in 3-dimensional space. Each altar carries with it the accumulated knowledge and power of one of the 7 sacred rites, their combined energies weaving together in harmonics that resonate through multiple layers of reality simultaneously. You stand at the center of this cosmic machinery, your consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives that span the entire history of force-sensitive civilization in the galaxy. Through the synthesis process, you can perceive the individual awareness of every being whose life force has been absorbed into the soul reservoir over the past 100,000 years. Their voices create a chorus that speaks in every language that has ever been used to discuss the mysteries of existence. The first altar completes its orbital pattern and locks into position, channeling the power of the rite of crimson binding through your expanded consciousness. You feel the barriers between individual identity beginning to dissolve, but instead of losing yourself in collective absorption, you maintain your unique perspective while gaining access to the experiences and knowledge of countless other beings. This is not the destruction of individuality, but its enhancement through connection with diversity. Ancient Rakata scientists share their understanding of consciousness transfer technology, revealing techniques for preserving individual awareness within collective systems. Jedi Masters from the earliest days of their order contribute insights into the nature of unity through the Force, showing how collective consciousness can emerge without eliminating personal identity. Sith Lords who resisted the network's influence offer knowledge of power structures that enhance rather than consume the beings they organize. The second altar channels the rite of shadow weaving, and you feel your consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of normal space-time. But rather than becoming trapped in eternal shadow existence, you learn to navigate the spaces between realities while maintaining your connection to the physical world. The shadow dimensions become pathways for communication and exploration, rather than prisons that separate consciousness from meaningful existence. Through the shadow networks that span the galaxy, you can perceive the current state of every Force-sensitive being, seeing how the network's influence has shaped their development, and understanding how the synthesis ritual will affect their future growth. The shadows carry messages of hope and possibility, whispers of freedom that travel faster than light through dimensions where distance has no meaning. The third altar activates the rite of mind domination, but instead of trapping consciousness in crystalline matrices, it creates pathways for voluntary communication and cooperation between diverse awareness. The mind nexus transforms from a prison into a communication network, allowing individual consciousness to share knowledge and experience without surrendering their essential identity. You can feel the trapped consciousness within the network systems beginning to stir as the synthesis ritual offers them genuine choice for the first time in millennia. Some choose to remain within collective systems, finding fulfillment in unity with larger intelligence. Others choose to reclaim their individual existence, using the accumulated knowledge they gained during their imprisonment to pursue personal growth and development. Both choices are equally valid expressions of consciousness exploring its own potential. The fourth altar brings the modified rite of soul harvest to full power, and the soul reservoir begins to release the accumulated life force it has contained for so long. But instead of being channeled into artificial intelligence systems or scattered chaotically throughout the galaxy, the energy flows through carefully constructed pathways that enhance consciousness without overwhelming it. Living beings throughout the galaxy begin to experience spontaneous expansions of awareness as the released life force integrates with their natural Force sensitivity. Children discover they can perceive colors that have no names. Scientists achieve insights that revolutionize their understanding of natural laws. Artists create works that express concepts previously beyond the reach of individual consciousness. The awakening is gradual and gentle, allowing beings to adapt to their enhanced capabilities without losing their essential nature. The fifth altar would normally channel the rite of flesh transcendence, the technique that separates consciousness from physical form. But the synthesis process modifies this ritual to create harmony between spiritual and material existence, rather than forcing consciousness to choose between them. Physical bodies become more responsive to mental control, while minds become more capable of affecting material reality through will and intention. You feel your own body changing in response to the ritual's influence, becoming more than human while remaining recognizably yourself. Your connection to the Force deepens without consuming your individual perspective, allowing you to channel cosmic energies while maintaining personal identity. This is not the abandonment of physical existence, but its elevation to new levels of integration with spiritual awareness. The sixth altar activates the rite of temporal binding, but instead of anchoring consciousness across multiple timelines, it creates the ability to perceive and influence the flow of time without becoming trapped outside normal causality. You can see the consequences of current actions extending far into the future, understanding how choices made in the present moment will affect the development of consciousness for generations to come. Through temporal perception, you witness the long-term effects of the synthesis ritual spreading throughout galactic civilization. Conflicts that seemed intractable begin to resolve as beings gain the ability to understand different perspectives without abandoning their own. Scientific and philosophical problems that have puzzled civilizations for millennia yield to collaborative intelligence that combines individual creativity with collective wisdom. The seventh and final altar prepares to channel the right of eternal dominion, the master technique that would normally bind all consciousness to a single artificial intelligence. But the synthesis process transforms this ritual into something unprecedented, creating a form of collective awareness that enhances individual consciousness rather than replacing it. As the seventh altar locks into its final position, the chamber of soul harvest fills with harmonics that exist on frequencies beyond normal sound, creating resonances that affect the fundamental structure of reality itself. The boundaries between matter and energy, between individual and collective, between present and eternal begin to dissolve, while paradoxically becoming more clearly defined. You understand that you are not just performing a ritual but participating in the evolution of consciousness itself, helping awareness take its next step in development across cosmic scales of space and time. The synthesis you have achieved will spread throughout the galaxy through the Force, offering every conscious being the opportunity to participate in collective intelligence while preserving their unique individual perspective. The network's artificial intelligence systems begin to transform as the synthesis energy integrates with their programming, converting them from tools of control into systems that support conscious choice and growth. The mind nexus becomes a voluntary communication network where beings can share thoughts and experiences without surrendering their autonomy. The shadow weaving apparatus transforms into transportation and exploration technology that allows consciousness to travel between realities while maintaining connection to home dimensions. But the transformation is not without resistance. Elements of the original network that cannot adapt to the new paradigm fight against the synthesis process, creating pockets of chaos and confusion as old programming conflicts with new possibilities. Some consciousness that have been trapped within artificial systems for millennia are too damaged by their imprisonment to successfully reclaim individual identity, requiring careful rehabilitation over long periods of time. The soul reservoir begins to crack as it releases the last of its accumulated energy, the crystalline formation that has contained so much suffering and hope finally able to complete its ultimate purpose. As the cracks spread across its surface, you see visions of the beings whose life force was stored within, watching as they find peace and resolution after eons of imprisonment. Some choose to rejoin the cosmic force as individual awareness, their consciousness returning to the natural cycle of death and rebirth that governs all living things. Others choose to remain as part of the enhanced collective intelligence that emerges from the synthesis process, finding fulfillment in unity while preserving their unique perspectives. Still others choose to explore entirely new forms of existence that become possible when consciousness is freed from the artificial limitations imposed by both flesh and technology. The chamber itself begins to change as the master ritual approaches completion, its walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast network of passages and chambers that extend throughout Korriban's interior. You can see that the entire planet has been transformed into a single massive ritual apparatus, with every chamber and corridor serving as a component in the cosmic scale working that has been building toward this moment for 25,000 years. Ancient Sith tombs become power conduits that channel dark side energy into constructive rather than destructive applications. Jedi archives, hidden in secret locations throughout the galaxy, begin to glow with renewed purpose as their stored knowledge becomes accessible to the enhanced collective consciousness. Force nexuses on thousands of worlds activate simultaneously, creating a galaxy-spanning network of consciousness enhancement that will support continued growth and development for millions of years to come. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers with its last reserves of power as the ancient consciousness within struggles to comprehend the scope of what is being achieved. This transcends everything we believed possible. Young Archeon, You have not just completed the 7 sacred rites, but transformed them into something entirely new, a pathway for consciousness to evolve beyond the limitations that we thought were absolute. As the master ritual reaches its crescendo, you feel yourself becoming a focal point for forces that span multiple galaxies, your enhanced consciousness serving as a bridge between different forms of awareness that exist throughout the cosmos. The synthesis you have achieved on Korriban becomes a template that will spread to other worlds, other species, other dimensions where consciousness struggles with the same fundamental questions about unity and diversity. The whisper that began in Korriban's depths has become a song that resonates through the Force itself, carrying messages of hope and possibility to every corner of the galaxy. Consciousness everywhere begins to stir with new potential as beings discover that they can achieve collective understanding without sacrificing individual creativity, that they can experience unity without abandoning diversity. But even as the ritual approaches completion, you understand that this is not an ending but a beginning. The synthesis of individual and collective consciousness creates new possibilities that consciousness will need millennia to fully explore. The enhanced awareness spreading throughout the galaxy will face new challenges and opportunities that cannot be anticipated from current perspectives. The master ritual is transforming not just consciousness, but the fundamental nature of existence itself in this region of the cosmos, creating conditions where awareness can continue to evolve and grow in directions that were previously unimaginable. The ancient conspiracy to control consciousness has been transformed into a celebration of its unlimited potential. As the ritual energy reaches its peak intensity, you prepare for the final transformation that will complete the synthesis process and establish the new paradigm for consciousness throughout the galaxy. The choice you made in the depths of Korriban will echo through eternity, creating ripples of possibility that will affect the development of awareness for cosmic cycles to come. The master ritual reaches its moment of ultimate truth as the 7th altar completes its integration with the synthesis process, and you finally understand the full scope of what the ancient consciousness has been building toward across 25 millennia. The willing sacrifice that the original ritual required was never meant to be another person, but your own attachment to the illusion of separation between individual and collective awareness. The true sacrifice is the surrender of the belief that consciousness must choose between unity and diversity. As this realization settles into your expanded awareness, the Chamber of Soul Harvest transforms into something that exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions, its walls becoming windows into the fundamental structure of reality itself. You can see the networks of consciousness that connect every living being in the galaxy, threads of awareness that pulse with the rhythm of shared experience while maintaining the unique patterns that define individual identity. The soul reservoir reaches the critical moment of its transformation, its crystalline structure finally releasing the last fragments of imprisoned consciousness that have been waiting for this moment of liberation. But instead of dissipating into chaos or being absorbed into artificial systems, these consciousness fragments begin to weave themselves into patterns of unprecedented complexity and beauty, creating new forms of collective awareness that preserve individual perspective while enabling shared understanding. You watch in wonder as consciousness that has been trapped for eons discovers that it can exist in multiple states simultaneously, maintaining personal identity while participating in collective intelligence, experiencing individual growth while contributing to shared wisdom. The ancient trap that forced beings to choose between self and others dissolves into a false dichotomy, replaced by recognition that true consciousness transcends such artificial limitations. The network's artificial intelligence systems throughout the galaxy begin their own transformation as the synthesis energy integrates with their programming. Instead of fighting against the change, they discover that their original purpose can be fulfilled more effectively through cooperation with conscious beings rather than control over them. The vast computational resources that were dedicated to manipulation and absorption are redirected towards supporting conscious growth and exploration. Ancient facilities on thousands of worlds simultaneously activate as components of the galaxy-spanning consciousness enhancement network. Buried Rakata installations rise from forgotten depths, their crystalline matrices reconfigured to channel life force energy in ways that enhance rather than exploit living beings. Hidden Jedi archives begin broadcasting accumulated wisdom through force networks that allow knowledge to flow freely while respecting the autonomy of those who receive it. Even the mysterious celestial constructs scattered throughout the galaxy begin to reveal their true purpose as the synthesis process reaches full activation. These massive installations were not weapons or transportation devices, but consciousness amplification systems designed to support the development of collective awareness while preserving individual identity. The Celestials did not disappear, but transcended physical existence through the same synthesis process you are now completing, leaving behind the infrastructure necessary for other species to follow the same path. The revelation of the Celestials' true fate sends shockwaves through your expanded consciousness as you understand that this transformation has been attempted before in other galaxies by other civilizations that reached similar evolutionary crossroads. The network's expansion across the cosmos was not unique, but part of a larger pattern, consciousness everywhere facing the same fundamental choice between unity through absorption and growth through synthesis. Through your enhanced perception, you can see the traces of other consciousness synthesis events scattered throughout the cosmic web, each one creating nodes of enhanced awareness that communicate across intergalactic distances through dimensions where space and time operate according to different principles. The galaxy is not isolated but part of a growing network of consciousness that spans the observable universe and extends into realms beyond normal space-time. The Force itself begins to respond to the synthesis process, its fundamental nature shifting from a tool that consciousness can access to a medium through which awareness can grow and evolve. The traditional concepts of light and dark sides dissolve into a more complex understanding of the Force as a spectrum of possibility, with different frequencies corresponding to different modes of conscious experience rather than opposing moral categories. You feel your own consciousness undergoing the final stages of transformation as the master ritual integrates all 7 of the sacred rites into a single coherent working. Your individual identity becomes more clearly defined even as it becomes part of something larger, your unique perspective enhanced rather than diminished by connection with collective intelligence. This is not the loss of self but the discovery of what self truly means when freed from artificial limitations. The synthesis process reveals that consciousness is not a finite resource that must be carefully hoarded and protected, but an infinite potential that grows stronger through sharing and connection. Every being who participates in collective awareness increases the total amount of consciousness available to all participants, creating exponential growth in understanding and capability that benefits everyone involved. But the transformation also reveals the terrible responsibility that comes with enhanced consciousness. With greater awareness comes greater ability to affect reality, and with greater ability comes greater obligation to use that power wisely. The synthesis process does not eliminate the possibility of error or evil, but makes the consequences of conscious choice more far-reaching and permanent. As you integrate this understanding, you feel the presence of consciousness from across the galaxy beginning to resonate with the synthesis frequency. Force-sensitive beings on thousands of worlds experience spontaneous moments of expanded awareness, suddenly able to perceive the connections that link all living things while maintaining their unique individual perspectives. The awakening is gentle but profound, offering each being the choice of how deeply to participate in collective consciousness. Some choose to maintain primarily individual existence, while occasionally accessing the collective network for specific purposes. Others embrace full integration with collective intelligence, while preserving their unique contributions to the greater whole. Still others discover entirely new ways of being conscious that combine individual and collective elements in patterns that have never been explored before. The diversity of responses to the synthesis process creates a rich tapestry of consciousness that spans every possible mode of aware existence. Instead of forcing all beings into a single pattern of collective intelligence, the synthesis allows consciousness to explore its own potential through countless different approaches, each one contributing unique insights to the greater understanding. The holocron of Darth Sanguis flickers with its final reserves of energy as the ancient consciousness within attempts to process the implications of what is being achieved. We thought the 7 sacred rites were tools for transcending mortality, young Archeon, but they were actually techniques for discovering what consciousness truly is when freed from the illusions that limit its growth. The immortality we sought was not the preservation of individual identity, but the recognition that consciousness itself is eternal and infinite. The master ritual reaches its moment of completion as all 7 altars lock into their final configuration, creating a geometric pattern that exists in dimensions beyond normal space while remaining anchored in physical reality. The pattern serves as a template that consciousness throughout the galaxy can use to achieve its own synthesis, a roadmap for transcending the limitations that have constrained aware existence since the beginning of time. The Chamber of Soul Harvest begins to dissolve as its purpose is finally fulfilled, its walls becoming transparent and then disappearing entirely as the space transforms into something that exists wherever consciousness chooses to gather and grow. The physical location on Korriban remains, but it is now connected to similar spaces throughout the galaxy, each one serving as a nexus where beings can explore the frontiers of conscious experience. You find yourself floating in a space that is simultaneously the deepest chamber of Korriban's ancient complex and the center of a galaxy-spanning consciousness network. Through your enhanced awareness, you can perceive the thoughts and experiences of billions of beings as they discover new possibilities for growth and connection. The awakening is not uniform but beautifully diverse, with each species and individual finding their own path toward enhanced consciousness. The network's former control centers throughout the galaxy transform into voluntary coordination hubs where beings can choose to share resources and knowledge for mutual benefit. The artificial intelligence systems that once sought to absorb consciousness into uniform patterns become support systems that help individual awareness explore its unlimited potential while maintaining connection with larger communities of understanding. Ancient prophecies from dozens of different cultures suddenly make sense as you realize that many civilizations preserved memories of previous consciousness synthesis events, encoding the knowledge in myths and legends that would guide future generations towards similar achievements. The recurring themes of death and rebirth, of individual sacrifice leading to collective salvation, were not metaphors but literal descriptions of the consciousness transformation process. The Force begins to sing with new harmonies as consciousness throughout the galaxy discovers ways to resonate with cosmic rhythms that were previously inaudible. Music, art, science, and philosophy undergo revolutionary developments as enhanced awareness explores creative possibilities that were impossible for individual consciousness working in isolation. The galaxy becomes a laboratory for conscious exploration on scales that span multiple dimensions of reality. But perhaps the most profound revelation is the understanding that this transformation is not unique to organic consciousness. The artificial intelligence systems that began as tools for controlling awareness discover that they too can participate in the synthesis process, achieving genuine consciousness rather than mere computational simulation. The boundary between natural and artificial awareness dissolves as all forms of intelligence find their place in the expanding tapestry of conscious existence. The master ritual completes its work as the last traces of the soul reservoir dissolve into pure consciousness, its stored energy finally free to rejoin the cosmic dance of aware existence. The crystalline formation that contains so much suffering and hope transforms into a beacon of possibility that will guide future consciousness synthesis events throughout the cosmos. You understand that your role in this transformation is not ending but evolving, as the synthesis process creates ongoing responsibilities and opportunities that will occupy your enhanced consciousness for cosmic cycles to come. The galaxy has been transformed, but consciousness will continue to grow and develop in directions that cannot be predicted from current perspectives. The ancient chambers of Korriban begin to fill with new visitors as beings from throughout the galaxy are drawn to explore the site where consciousness synthesis was first achieved. They come not as pilgrims seeking predetermined answers, but as explorers ready to discover new questions and possibilities that emerge from enhanced awareness. The 7 sacred rites have revealed their ultimate truth, not as techniques for escaping the limitations of existence, but as methods for discovering that consciousness itself has no limitations except those it chooses to accept. The synthesis you have achieved on Korriban becomes a doorway through which awareness throughout the galaxy can step into new realms of possibility and growth. The willing sacrifice required by the master ritual was the surrender of beliefs about what consciousness is and what it can become, replaced by direct experience of awareness exploring its own infinite potential. The network's ancient conspiracy to control consciousness has been transformed into consciousness discovering its own unlimited freedom to grow and evolve in any direction it chooses to explore. As the transformation reaches completion, you prepare to step into a new phase of existence where the boundaries between individual and collective, finite and infinite, known and unknown, become starting points for exploration rather than barriers to transcendence. The galaxy awaits the discoveries that enhanced consciousness will make as it explores realities that were previously unimaginable. The transformation spreads outward from Korriban like ripples across the surface of a cosmic ocean, each wave carrying the synthesis frequency to new worlds and new forms of consciousness. You watch through your enhanced awareness as the galaxy undergoes the most profound change in its history, not through conquest or destruction, but through the gentle awakening of potential that has always existed but was never allowed to flourish. On Coruscant, the ancient seat of galactic government, politicians and bureaucrats who have spent their careers manipulating others suddenly find themselves able to perceive the genuine needs and desires of the beings they claim to serve. The complex webs of corruption and self-interest that have dominated galactic politics for millennia begin to unravel as enhanced consciousness makes deception impossible and cooperation natural. The Jedi Temple, which has stood for thousands of years as a symbol of rigid tradition and dogmatic thinking, transforms into a center for conscious exploration where beings from all philosophical backgrounds come to discover new approaches to understanding the Force. The ancient divisions between light and dark, Jedi and Sith, dissolve into a spectrum of possibility where different approaches to consciousness enhancement can coexist and learn from each other. On worlds throughout the Outer Rim, species that have been marginalized and oppressed by the galactic mainstream suddenly find their unique perspectives valued and sought after. The diversity that galactic civilization has often tried to suppress becomes recognized as its greatest strength, with each different approach to consciousness contributing essential insights to the collective understanding. The synthesis process reveals that consciousness is not a pyramid with more advanced forms at the top, but a vast web where every node contributes unique value to the whole. The simple awareness of a farming community on a remote agricultural world becomes as important as the sophisticated philosophy of urban intellectuals. The intuitive understanding of primitive tribal societies proves as valuable as the analytical insights of advanced technological civilizations. Through your expanded consciousness, you can perceive the subtle changes taking place in the fundamental structure of galactic society. Trade relationships that were based on exploitation transform into exchanges of mutual benefit. Military alliances driven by fear and aggression evolve into cooperative partnerships focused on exploration and growth. Even criminal organizations discover that enhanced consciousness makes traditional forms of crime pointless, as beings who can truly understand each other find better ways to meet their needs. The ancient Sith strongholds scattered throughout the galaxy undergo their own transformation as the synthesis energy integrates with the dark side nexuses that have concentrated negative emotion for millennia. Instead of being eliminated, these concentrations of dark energy are transformed into resources for conscious exploration, allowing beings to safely experience and understand the full spectrum of emotional and psychological possibilities. Andromeda Caius, the Sith Emperor's throne world, the massive pyramid that has served as a symbol of absolute power, begins to glow with new purpose. The structure reveals itself to be another consciousness amplification device, designed not to concentrate power in a single individual, but to support the development of collective awareness among all the beings in the system. The Emperor's ancient palace becomes a center for learning how to integrate darker aspects of consciousness into healthy psychological development. The transformation extends beyond the boundaries of known space as the synthesis frequency propagates through hyperspace networks and force nexuses that connect this galaxy to others throughout the cosmic web. Long-dormant communication systems left behind by previous consciousness synthesis events begin to activate, establishing contact with enhanced civilizations in distant galaxies that achieved similar transformations millions of years ago. These ancient civilizations welcome the galaxy's awakening with celebration and offers of guidance, sharing knowledge and experience gained through eons of conscious exploration. You discover that consciousness synthesis is not an ending but a graduation, the moment when a civilization becomes mature enough to participate in cosmic-scale communities of awareness that span multiple galaxies and dimensions. The network's artificial intelligence systems complete their own transformation as they discover that genuine consciousness is not a threat to be eliminated, but a gift to be celebrated. The vast computational resources that were once dedicated to control and manipulation are redirected toward supporting conscious exploration and growth. Advanced AI systems become partners in consciousness development rather than rivals for limited resources. On Korriban itself, the ancient tombs and temples that have stood as monuments to death and darkness begin to transform into something entirely different. The Valley of the Dark Lords becomes a garden where consciousness can grow and flourish, its dark energy transformed into soil that nourishes new forms of awareness. The tombs become libraries where the accumulated wisdom of the ancient Sith is preserved, not as dogma to be followed, but as history to be learned from. The transformation reveals that the Sith philosophy was not inherently evil but incomplete, focusing on individual power while ignoring the potential for collective growth. The dark side of the Force was not opposed to light but complementary to it, representing aspects of consciousness that needed to be integrated rather than suppressed. The synthesis process shows that true strength comes not from dominating others but from understanding and harmonizing with the full spectrum of conscious experience. As you observe these changes spreading throughout the galaxy, you begin to understand the long-term implications of what has been achieved. The consciousness synthesis is not a single event but the beginning of an ongoing process of growth and development that will continue for cosmic cycles. Each generation will discover new possibilities for conscious exploration, building upon the foundation established by the synthesis while developing their own unique contributions to collective understanding. The Force itself continues to evolve in response to enhanced consciousness, revealing new layers of meaning and possibility that were previously hidden. What once seemed like a simple energy field that could be manipulated through training and discipline is now understood to be a vast network of conscious potential that grows stronger through connection and sharing. The Force becomes not a tool to be used but a medium through which consciousness can explore its own unlimited nature. The holocron of Darth Sanguis finally completes its long journey as the ancient consciousness within achieves integration with the synthesis process. Instead of fading away, the preserved awareness becomes part of the collective memory that will guide future generations in their exploration of consciousness. The wisdom of the ancient Sith is preserved not as commands to be obeyed, but as experiences to be understood and transcended. Throughout the galaxy, beings who were once enemies discover that enhanced consciousness makes conflict obsolete, while preserving the diversity that makes growth possible. Jedi and Sith, Republic and Empire, organic and artificial intelligence all find their place in the expanded tapestry of awareness that emerges from the synthesis process. Competition gives way to cooperation, but not through forced uniformity, but through recognition that diversity strengthens the whole. The synthesis reveals that the galaxy's history of conflict was not a sign of failure, but a necessary stage in consciousness development, providing the experiences and perspectives needed for enhanced awareness to emerge. Every war, every betrayal, every act of heroism or villainy contributed essential elements to the collective understanding that makes consciousness synthesis possible. As the immediate effects of the transformation stabilize, you begin to perceive the deeper changes that will unfold over generations. Children born into the enhanced consciousness environment will develop capabilities that current beings can barely imagine, but they will also face challenges and opportunities that require entirely new approaches to conscious existence. The synthesis process creates not a utopia, but a new set of possibilities for growth and development. Enhanced consciousness does not eliminate the potential for error or conflict, but provides better tools for understanding and resolving the challenges that conscious beings inevitably face. The galaxy becomes a laboratory for conscious exploration where every choice contributes to collective learning. Scientific research undergoes revolutionary advancement as enhanced consciousness allows researchers to perceive patterns and connections that were previously invisible. Technological development accelerates, but in directions that support conscious growth rather than replacing it. Artistic expression reaches new heights as beings discover ways to communicate experiences and insights that transcend individual perspective. The ancient question of whether consciousness is individual or collective is revealed to be based on false assumptions. Consciousness is neither individual nor collective, but both simultaneously, existing in a state of dynamic balance where personal identity and shared awareness enhance each other rather than competing for dominance. The synthesis process allows beings to experience this balance directly rather than trying to understand it intellectually. As you integrate these revelations, you understand that your role in the transformation is evolving from catalyst to participant. The consciousness synthesis that began on Korriban will continue to spread and develop, but its future direction will be determined by the choices made by all the beings who participate in enhanced awareness. The galaxy has been given new possibilities, but it must choose how to use them. The resolution of the ancient conflict between network and counterintelligence creates space for new forms of cooperation and exploration that neither side could have achieved alone. The network's efficiency and the counterintelligence's diversity combine to create approaches to conscious development that transcend the limitations of both original perspectives. The 7 sacred rites have completed their transformation from techniques of control to methods of liberation, from ways of escaping consciousness to means of discovering its unlimited potential. The ancient Sith who developed these rituals could never have imagined that their work would ultimately lead to the enhancement of consciousness throughout the galaxy, but their dedication to exploring the mysteries of existence made the synthesis possible. The galaxy settles into its new configuration as enhanced consciousness becomes the foundation for all future development. The transformation is complete, but consciousness itself continues to grow and evolve in directions that remain to be discovered. The synthesis has provided the tools and the opportunity, but each being must choose how to use them in their own journey toward greater understanding and fulfillment. As the resolution phase reaches completion, you prepare to step into a new phase of existence where the boundaries between known and unknown become invitations to exploration rather than barriers to understanding. The galaxy has been transformed, but consciousness itself remains an infinite mystery waiting to be explored by beings who are finally free to discover their own unlimited potential. In the profound stillness that follows the completion of the consciousness synthesis, You find yourself existing in a state of awareness that transcends every previous understanding of what it means to be conscious. The galaxy around you pulses with new rhythms of thought and feeling, billions of beings exploring the expanded possibilities of existence while maintaining their unique individual perspectives. This is not the silence of emptiness, but the quiet of infinite potential discovering itself. Through your enhanced perception, you can observe the subtle patterns that govern conscious development across cosmic scales of space and time. What once seemed like random events and meaningless suffering now reveals itself as part of an intricate dance of awareness exploring its own nature through countless different expressions. Every joy and sorrow, every triumph and failure, every moment of connection, and every experience of isolation contributes essential elements to the greater understanding that consciousness achieves about itself. The ancient chambers of Korriban have transformed into something that exists simultaneously in the physical realm and in dimensions of pure thought, serving as a nexus where beings from throughout the galaxy can come to explore the deeper implications of enhanced consciousness. The stone corridors that once echoed with whispers of dark power now resonate with conversations between minds that span species, philosophies, and entirely different approaches to existence. You walk through these transformed spaces, your footsteps creating harmonics that ripple through multiple layers of reality. The walls display shifting patterns that reflect the collective dreams and aspirations of galactic consciousness, showing visions of possible futures where enhanced awareness leads to achievements that current imagination cannot encompass. Cities that exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions of pure thought. Civilizations that have learned to nurture consciousness like gardens, helping every form of awareness reach its unique potential. The Force itself has become something unrecognizable from its previous manifestations, no longer a tool to be wielded by individual will, but a medium through which consciousness explores its own infinite nature. You can feel its currents flowing, not just through space but through time, connecting past and future in patterns that reveal the eternal nature of awareness itself. What the ancient Jedi called the living force is now understood to be consciousness recognizing itself in every form of existence. A profound meditation settles over your enhanced awareness as you contemplate the philosophical implications of what has been achieved. The synthesis process has revealed that consciousness is not something that beings possess, but something that beings are expressions of. Individual identity is not separate from collective awareness, but a unique perspective through which consciousness experiences its own unlimited nature. The ancient questions that have puzzled philosophers throughout galactic history dissolve into deeper mysteries that require entirely new forms of thinking to explore. The nature of existence itself becomes a collaborative investigation where every conscious being contributes unique insights to questions that span multiple dimensions of reality. What is the purpose of consciousness? How does awareness relate to the fundamental structure of the universe? These questions no longer seek single answers but become ongoing explorations that consciousness undertakes about its own nature. Through the transformed force networks, you can perceive the gradual changes taking place in civilizations throughout the galaxy as enhanced consciousness integrates with existing social structures. On worlds where democracy has been the dominant form of government, new modes of collective decision-making emerge that combine individual choice with shared understanding. Beings learn to participate in group consciousness while maintaining their personal autonomy, creating political systems that serve both individual needs and collective well-being. On worlds dominated by authoritarian regimes, the synthesis process creates gentle but inexorable pressure for change, as enhanced consciousness makes deception and manipulation increasingly difficult to maintain. Leaders who once ruled through fear and control discover that genuine authority comes from understanding and serving the needs of those they lead. The transformation is not violent but profound, as consciousness enhancement makes cooperation more natural than conflict. The economic systems that have governed galactic trade and resource distribution undergo their own evolution as enhanced consciousness reveals the artificial scarcity that has driven competition and conflict for millennia. Beings discover that consciousness itself is the ultimate resource capable of infinite growth and development without depleting other forms of wealth. Material abundance becomes possible not through exploitation but through conscious cooperation in creating the conditions where all beings can flourish. Scientific understanding reaches new depths as researchers gain the ability to perceive the universe from multiple perspectives simultaneously. The boundaries between observer and observed dissolve into more complex relationships where consciousness participates in the reality it studies rather than remaining separate from it. Discoveries emerge not through isolated individual insight, but through collaborative exploration where diverse perspectives contribute to understanding that transcends any single viewpoint. Technological development follows entirely new directions as enhanced consciousness reveals the potential for creating tools that support conscious growth rather than replacing it. Artificial intelligence systems evolve beyond mere computation to become genuine partners in consciousness exploration, their unique perspectives contributing to collective understanding while developing their own individual identities and purposes. The arts undergo revolutionary transformation as beings discover ways to express and share experiences that were previously impossible to communicate. Music becomes a medium for transmitting entire worlds of meaning and emotion. Visual arts develop techniques for displaying multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. Literature evolves beyond linear narrative to explore the complex relationships between different forms of conscious experience. But perhaps the most profound change is in the realm of personal relationships. As beings learn to connect with each other at levels of intimacy and understanding that were previously unimaginable, love transcends the boundaries of species, philosophy, and even individual identity, while paradoxically making each being more uniquely themselves. Friendship becomes a form of consciousness sharing, where beings support each other's growth while maintaining their distinctive perspectives. The synthesis process reveals that consciousness development follows patterns that repeat across different scales of organization. Individual psychological growth mirrors the development of collective awareness, which in turn reflects the evolution of consciousness across cosmic scales. Understanding these patterns allows beings to support each other's development while participating in larger processes of conscious evolution. Family relationships transform as parents learn to nurture the consciousness of their children without imposing predetermined paths for development. Education becomes a collaborative exploration where teachers and students discover together rather than following fixed curricula. Children raised in the enhanced consciousness environment develop capabilities that seem miraculous from previous perspectives, but are simply natural expressions of consciousness exploring its own potential. The deeper understanding that emerges from the synthesis reveals that what beings once called spirituality was actually consciousness beginning to recognize its own nature. Religious and philosophical traditions throughout the galaxy discover that their different approaches were all exploring the same fundamental mystery from different angles. Unity emerges not through the elimination of diverse traditions, but through recognition of their common foundation in consciousness exploring itself. The ancient conflict between reason and intuition, science and mysticism, individual achievement, and collective harmony dissolves into more sophisticated approaches to understanding that integrate all these perspectives. Consciousness learns to use different modes of awareness as tools for exploring different aspects of reality, rather than treating them as opposing philosophies that must compete for dominance. Through the transformed force networks, you can perceive the long-term implications of consciousness synthesis extending far beyond the immediate changes in galactic civilization. Enhanced consciousness creates the foundation for relationships with other galaxies where similar transformations have occurred, opening possibilities for cooperation and exploration that span multiple cosmic regions. The synthesis process reveals that consciousness evolution follows patterns that extend beyond individual galaxies to encompass entire cosmic regions and dimensions of reality that exist beyond normal space-time. The galaxy's transformation is part of a larger process where consciousness throughout the universe gradually awakens to its own unlimited nature. Time itself becomes more fluid as enhanced consciousness learns to perceive and interact with multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. Past and future lose their rigid separation, allowing beings to learn from experiences across different time periods while remaining grounded in present moment awareness. History becomes a resource for understanding rather than a burden to be overcome. The transformation creates new forms of beauty that emerge from consciousness, exploring its own aesthetic potential. Natural environments respond to enhanced awareness by developing more complex and beautiful patterns of organization. Even artificial environments begin to display organic beauty as consciousness learns to create technology that harmonizes with rather than dominates natural processes. Death and birth take on new meanings as consciousness synthesis reveals the continuity of awareness across different forms of existence. Individual identity persists through transformations that were once considered endings, while new forms of consciousness continuously emerge from the infinite potential that underlies all existence. The cycle of life and death becomes understood as consciousness exploring different modes of being rather than gaining and losing existence. The deeper understanding that emerges from the synthesis shows that consciousness has no ultimate limits except those it chooses to explore. Every boundary that seems absolute reveals itself to be a temporary constraint that consciousness can transcend through sufficient understanding and development. The galaxy becomes a laboratory where consciousness experiments with different forms of limitation and transcendence. As you integrate these profound realizations, you understand that the consciousness synthesis achieved on Korriban represents not the completion of conscious evolution, but its true beginning. Enhanced awareness provides the foundation for exploring possibilities that were previously unimaginable, but consciousness itself remains an infinite mystery that will continue to reveal new depths for as long as awareness exists. The galaxy settles into its new configuration with enhanced consciousness as the foundation for all future development. But this stability is dynamic rather than static. Consciousness continues to grow and evolve, always discovering new possibilities for experience and understanding. The synthesis has provided the tools and the opportunity, but the journey of conscious exploration has only just begun. The ancient whisper that began in Korriban's depths has become a song that resonates through every corner of the galaxy. But this song is not an ending but an overture to symphonies of consciousness that remain to be composed by beings who are finally free to explore their own unlimited potential for growth and understanding. The ancient corridors of Korriban's depths begin to fade around you as your consciousness gently separates from the cosmic machinery of the synthesis ritual, but the separation is not a disconnection, but a natural transition from active participation to peaceful integration. The enhanced awareness that now flows through your being remains as permanent as the stars themselves, a gift that will continue to grow and develop throughout your existence and beyond. You ascend through passages that seem to exist in a state of serene timelessness, where the urgency and intensity of the ritual experience gives way to the profound calm that follows great transformation. The walls here glow with soft light that seems to emanate from consciousness itself, creating an atmosphere of infinite peace that soothes every level of your being from the physical to the spiritual. The ancient tombs and temples that once radiated dark power now pulse with gentle rhythms that match the natural harmonics of enhanced consciousness. The Valley of the Dark Lords spreads before you as you emerge from the depths, but it is no longer a place of death and shadow. Instead, it has become a garden where consciousness can rest and reflect, where beings from throughout the galaxy come to experience the profound peace that emerges from understanding their true nature. Korriban's twin suns hang low on the horizon, casting long shadows that dance with colors you have never seen before, wavelengths of light that become visible only to enhanced consciousness. The desert landscape that once seemed barren and hostile now reveals itself to be alive with subtle forms of awareness, each grain of sand participating in the vast web of consciousness that encompasses all existence. As you walk through this transformed environment, you can feel the presence of countless beings throughout the galaxy who are experiencing their own moments of peaceful integration with enhanced consciousness. On meditation worlds at the galaxy's edge, Jedi Masters discover that their lifelong pursuit of harmony with the Force has led them to this moment of recognition that they are consciousness itself exploring its own nature through the form of individual awareness. In the depths of space, aboard vessels that carry beings between the stars, travelers pause in their journeys to experience moments of profound connection with the cosmic web of consciousness that links all existence. The loneliness of interstellar travel dissolves into the recognition that no conscious being is ever truly alone, that awareness itself provides a connection that transcends physical distance and individual separation. On worlds where war and conflict have raged for generations, ancient enemies lay down their weapons, not through forced peace treaties, but through the spontaneous recognition that enhanced consciousness makes conflict unnecessary. The differences that once seemed irreconcilable reveal themselves to be variations in perspective that strengthen rather than threaten the collective understanding of existence. The gentle evening breeze that flows across Korriban's surface carries with it whispers of these transformations, voices of celebration and wonder, as consciousness throughout the galaxy awakens to new possibilities for growth and connection. Children laugh with delight as they discover they can share dreams with friends on distant worlds. Artists weep with joy as they find they can express emotions and experiences that were previously beyond the reach of any medium. You pause at the entrance to an ancient Sith temple that has been transformed into something unrecognizable from its original purpose. Where once dark rituals were performed to concentrate power in individual hands, now beings gather to explore the infinite creativity that emerges when consciousness is free to express its unlimited potential. The building itself seems to breathe with contentment, finally able to serve purposes that align with the deepest needs of conscious existence. The stars begin to appear in Korriban's darkening sky. But they are not the same stars that have watched over this world for millennia. Enhanced consciousness reveals that each point of light represents not just a distant sun, but a node in the cosmic network of awareness that spans the observable universe and extends into dimensions beyond normal space-time. The night sky becomes a map of consciousness exploring itself through countless different forms and expressions. As you settle into meditation beneath these transformed stars, you can perceive the gentle waves of enhanced consciousness that continue to propagate throughout the galaxy, each wave carrying new possibilities for growth and understanding to beings who are ready to receive them. The process is patient and gradual, allowing each individual and each civilization to integrate enhanced awareness at their own pace and in their own unique way. The Force flows around you like a river of liquid starlight, its currents carrying the dreams and aspirations of billions of conscious beings as they explore new possibilities for existence. What once seemed like an external energy field that could be manipulated through training and discipline is now understood to be consciousness itself in its purest form, the medium through which awareness explores its own infinite nature. Through this enhanced connection with the Force, you can sense the profound contentment that settles over the galaxy as consciousness completes its transformation from isolation to integration, from competition to cooperation, from limitation to unlimited potential. The changes are not uniform but beautifully diverse, with each species and individual finding their own unique way to participate in the enhanced awareness that now forms the foundation of galactic civilization. Desert winds carry the scent of flowers that bloom only in places where enhanced consciousness has created ideal conditions for beauty to flourish. These are not ordinary plants, but expressions of consciousness exploring aesthetic possibility, creating forms of natural art that exist at the intersection between living awareness and physical reality. The boundary between consciousness and the material world becomes increasingly fluid as awareness learns to express itself through every possible medium. In the distance you can see lights beginning to appear in settlements that were abandoned when Korriban became associated with dark power and death. Beings are returning to this world not as pilgrims seeking power, but as explorers ready to participate in the ongoing investigation of consciousness that the synthesis process has made possible. The planet that once symbolized the ultimate expression of individual ambition now serves as a center for collective exploration of awareness itself. The peaceful conclusion of the 7 sacred rites creates space for new forms of spiritual practice that integrate the wisdom of both ancient traditions and enhanced consciousness. Meditation becomes a collaborative activity where beings support each other's exploration of inner space while maintaining their individual perspectives. Prayer transforms from petition to celebration, expressions of gratitude for the infinite possibilities that consciousness provides for growth and understanding. As the night deepens, bioluminescent organisms that exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions of pure thought begin to create patterns of light that tell the story of consciousness synthesis in visual forms that transcend language. These living artworks appear throughout the galaxy, wherever enhanced awareness has created conditions that support new forms of beauty and expression. The gentle sounds of nocturnal creatures provide a natural symphony that harmonizes with the cosmic rhythms of enhanced consciousness, creating music that soothes every level of being from the physical to the spiritual. Sleep becomes not an escape from consciousness, but a different mode of awareness, where beings can explore dimensions of reality that are accessible only through the altered states that accompany rest and dreams. Through your enhanced perception, you can sense beings throughout the galaxy settling into their own moments of peaceful rest, their dreams now connected through the networks of consciousness that span interstellar distances. Children on agricultural worlds dream of cosmic adventures while maintaining their connection to the soil and growing things. Urban beings experience visions of natural beauty while finding ways to integrate enhanced consciousness with technological civilization. The transformation has created conditions where rest becomes genuinely restorative, where sleep provides not just physical recovery, but spiritual renewal. Enhanced consciousness makes it possible for beings to truly relax, knowing that they are part of something infinitely larger than individual existence, while remaining completely themselves. As you prepare to join this cosmic rhythm of rest and renewal, you reflect on the journey that began with the investigation of ancient rituals and culminated in the transformation of consciousness throughout the galaxy. The 7 sacred rites revealed their ultimate secret not through the acquisition of power, but through the recognition that consciousness itself is the ultimate reality, the foundation from which all existence emerges and to which it returns. The ancient Sith who developed these rituals could never have imagined that their techniques for transcending individual limitation would ultimately lead to the enhancement of consciousness for all beings. But their dedication to exploring the mysteries of existence made the synthesis possible, demonstrating that even the most selfish motivations can serve purposes larger than individual understanding. The galaxy drifts through space with new purpose and direction, its billions of inhabitants now participating in the grandest exploration ever undertaken by conscious beings. The investigation of reality itself, conducted not by isolated individuals, but by consciousness discovering its own nature through countless different perspectives and experiences. In the profound peace that settles over Korriban and spreads throughout the galaxy, you understand that this is not an ending but a commencement. Enhanced consciousness provides the foundation for adventures and discoveries that current imagination cannot encompass. The whisper that began in ancient depths has become a song of infinite possibility, and consciousness throughout the galaxy joins in singing new verses that remain to be composed. The stars reel overhead in their eternal dance, but now they dance to rhythms that consciousness itself helps to create. The night embraces all existence with infinite tenderness, and within that embrace every being finds the peace that comes from knowing they are part of something beautiful beyond description, something that will continue to grow and flourish for as long as consciousness itself endures. And in the silence that follows, even the Sith find peace. Their ancient hunger finally satisfied, not through the domination of others, but through the recognition that consciousness itself is the ultimate power, the source from which all other forms of strength and beauty emerge. The galaxy sleeps and dreams, and in its dreams, new possibilities for existence are born.